Welcome to Media Morsels, the podcast about creativity and the media that feeds it. I'm Jessica, character and aesthetic enthusiast.
I'm Jamie, plot guy and the summarizer.
And I'm Mitchie, vibe checker and scene chewer.
And this month is Amnesia Boy April month, and guess who were the Amnesia Boys?
It were us. We forgot to record.
We had a lot going on this month. It is my birthday month after all, and
We took a much overdue vacation.
Yes, and our schedule kind of got fucked. Yeah, in a word, yes. So we are probably going to have kind of a short
roster this month.
Yeah, a short roster this month, which is a shame because I do love my Amnesia Boys, and I've got plenty to talk about. But I think my schedule was a bit ambitious anyway. So this week, we are talking about X2, the sequel to X-Men, which came out in 2003, or 2 years
P.S. Oh, A.S., right, it's ass.
Yes, after Shrek.
Pardon me.
Two ass.
Two ass.
Two whole ass.
Not half ass.
And, oh my god. I haven't watched this movie in so many years, and I watched it again recently and loved it just as much as I did back in the day, and kind of like saw more now as a full-grown adult than I did as a teenager, and I'm just like, yes! So, yeah, I think we'll go ahead and jump into the appetizer round.
Alright, well, you've already done First Point of Contact. Or rather, you said you watched it years ago.
Yeah, I haven't really gone into it.
Tell us about your first time.
Okay. My first time. Well, you see.
When a girl and a Wolverine love each other very much.
Well, okay, I feel like you can't talk about X2 without talking about X-Men a little bit. So I remember seeing X-Men when it first came out. I think it was 2000. And I do remember going and seeing it in theaters. I don't know why. It didn't leave much of an impression on me that time. Maybe I was sleepy that day or something, because all I remember is that one scene where, spoilers ahead, Wolverine wakes up from a nightmare and accidentally stabs Rogue through the chest.
See, that's not the part of the first X-Men movie that sticks out in my head. The part that sticks out in my head is Storm zapping Toad.
Yeah, that was satisfying. But, so X2, I don't even know if I went to go see X2 in theaters. What I do clearly remember was, in 8th grade, I'm pretty sure, my mom and I were going to the public library, as we did, and we had discovered that they had a collection of VHS tapes and DVDs, and at the time I was kind of getting into superheroes, like mostly like Teen Titans and like Superman specifically.
I have a hard time imagining a version of you pre-superhero obsession.
Well, it was Horse Girl before that.
I see.
Yeah. And many other things besides, but many other phases. But so I picked it up and I was like, oh, X-Men. It's superheroes. Okay, let's go ahead and watch it. And I was fucking hooked. Instantly obsession with Wolverine unlocked, because he's probably, I think I have like 2 or 3 sort of like archetypal male characters that I really like, that I gravitate towards a lot. But Wolverine is very much that, like, anti-hero, sort of rough around the edges with a heart of gold, has amnesia or some other kind of angsty difficulties.
That's one way of putting it.
But yeah, but he's kind, and he's, he doesn't sugarcoat things. He is kind, but in like a blunt way. And treats young adults like people and stuff like that, like he does in X-Men. Yeah, so I think the first time I watched X2 was somewhere between like 13 and 15. And let me tell you, I watched X-Men and X2 like on loop for literally months. I at one point I had the entire scripts for each of those completely memorized.
Are you saying you don't still?
I not with the perfect recall that I did back then, including inflections and like facial expressions and stuff. This was my special interest.
It's a core memory.
It really is. And I wrote a whole, like, one of my first attempts at a novel actually revolved around teenage mutant superheroes. No, not Ninja Turtles. I actually have never seen that.
We'll amend that. It's fine.
Yeah.
I never got to watch that as a kid. But yeah, and it was awful. It was very thinly veiled, like just X-Men, you know, like but self-insert fanfic
I think
X-Men.
everybody's first story is a cringy self-insert.
Yeah, we'll get to that.
Yeah. And I remember writing, I don't know, like 50 pages of this and then giving it to my my stepmom, who was an adjunct English professor at Baylor, to just kind of like look over and edit. And she
That's kind of like
tore it
asking
apart.
Gordon Ramsay to rate a Lunchable, I feel like.
It really was. And like, you know, she wasn't like overly cruel about it. But
Because you're like, what, 14?
Or 15, something like that. But she did eviscerate it. And it was actually one of those things where I think this is like always a really important step on the road to becoming a writer, right? Is to, instead of being totally destroyed by criticism, being like, damn, how can I fix this? And if I can't fix it, I guess I'll move on, but I'm not gonna stop.
Well, yeah,
and
like,
this was like my moment.
I want to do it right, though.
Yeah. Man, I had whole like playlists that I had compiled in my head for like my X-Men fanfic, and then like, you know, just like Wolverine, but in like that very demisexual, like, I have a crush on you and I want to like talk
Stare
to
at
you and get to know you and like be in love with you and you in love with me, but like there wasn't any real, like, I don't know,
Physicality.
yeah. Just like being obsessed with this character, but like in an aesthetic and like I'm just fascinated by who you are way, not a sexual way. So yeah, that's my introduction to X2.
I actually do not have a clear recollection of my first contact with X-Men or X2, but I feel like it was probably just kind of catching it on TV, because there was a period of time where like TNT and all those other like movie channels would just play this shit on repeat. Mm-hmm. So I don't know that I ever like watched them in full all at once until years after they came out, but I essentially watched them in puzzle pieces. Yeah, I don't have nearly as much of a core obsession with this franchise. Like a proper little queer, I was not into superheroes. I was into Egyptian mythology, Greek mythology, and Legend of Zelda.
As a fellow queer, we're just two different types of queers.
Yes.
That's it. But I mean, like, but essentially mythology, especially like Greek mythology and shit like that, is just
they're alpha version superheroes.
Yeah.
But I just never got into comics or superheroes or anything until, like, God, the MCU launch with Iron Man, and now I'm burnt out with it.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
Actually, wait, there's one very important exception. The 90s Batman movies.
Oh my god. Okay, we gotta talk about those sometime.
We do.
Oh my god.
Batman Forever, specifically.
Yes, Batman Forever. That's the one that like I
that's
watched
the
all
one.
the time. And oh my god, the Tim Burton Batmans.
Tim Burton Batman was actually really good.
You know, okay, so real quick, one thing I want to say is that Spider-Man with Tobey Maguire and X-Men,
yeah.
they were the two. They were like the pattern, right? They were the formula. They were the first time that comic book media was really brought into the mainstream in a way
In
that
an arguably more serious
yes,
way.
in a grounded, serious way. Because before that, there had been like
Camp.
Spawn and Blade and some of these other...
I mean, you're also missing out, like, on the original Superman movies, too.
Yeah, the Christopher Reeve Superman, the 90s Batman.
Yeah.
But they're all, like, idealistic, exaggerated, campy afternoons.
Yeah, they're all very stylized, comic booky, but Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man and X-Men were like the two that really sort of created the groundwork for what would later launch the MCU, honestly.
Are you suggesting that Spider-Man and Spider-Man 2, made by Sam Raimi, didn't have camp?
Oh, it did.
It did.
But I would argue that those movies walked so the MCU could run.
Yeah. And it wasn't nearly the same. Like, when you look at Spawn, when you look at Christopher Reeves's Superman, when you look at particularly Tim Burton's Batman,
It's over the top.
Yeah, it was way over the top. It was
grounded at
It was
all.
very much trying to capture. It was trying to create a graphic novel in movie form, whereas I feel like Spider-Man and X-Men kind of like fully shifted over to how do we make this a movie? How do we make it work as a movie, not as a comic book that's been adapted into a movie?
Well, and more even, it's less like, how do we make a movie about superheroes, and more, how do we make a movie about people with superpowers?
Yes. Oh, yes.
Because
Such a
Spider-Man's
big
always been
point.
kind of like the everyman hero with like regular person problems. And I feel like X-Men definitely taps into that vein too.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, and it also speaks to some perennial issues.
How minorities deal with society and vice versa, let's say. And things that...
oppression and oppressors, and how do you deal with that?
We'll probably touch on it in conversation about this movie, just because how can you not?
How can you not? But also, we'll probably not...
We're not really equipped to, like, dig into it. It's not really the purview of this podcast.
Not really the purview of this podcast, and also, like, we could talk literally all night
well, I'm pretty
about
sure
that.
I guarantee there's entire college electives that are just about this.
Yeah, I feel like there's better places to look.
Yeah.
Okay, so my appetizer round. Hey, everybody, I'm here. The first memory that I remember of, like, doing anything regarding these movies, it was X-Men 1, and it was my birthday, and we had, like, a large birthday party, and we had gone to McDonald's beforehand.
That's lit.
And it was, like, I had, like, the Beast Wars stuff had just came out, and, like, I had one of those little toys with me, and, like, all of them, we were all just sitting together, and it was a very good time. However, I don't have that memory with X2, unfortunately.
Yeah.
But I remember watching it in a theater at some point. That's about it.
Yeah. Oh my god, that's so cute. I have a memory of going to another movie as a kid for, like, my birthday or somebody else's birthday, and it was the live action Flintstones.
Oh god.
To talk about, like, digging back into
I haven't thought about that movie in so long.
That movie is actually pretty good, though.
Was it?
Was it?
Was it?
I don't remember.
Okay.
I don't remember it being something I want to go back and revisit.
Okay, coming from the scene chewer and prop design guy.
I mean, yeah,
yes,
okay,
that
fair.
movie was pretty great.
I do remember.
Oh my God,
being
are we gonna have to, like-
visually interesting?
Are we gonna have to dig this up at some point? Just to see?
Well, there's also an interesting point of reference because Halle Berry is in X2, and then Halle Berry is also in Flintstones.
What?
movies.
Is she
Is
really?
she?
Yes.
Okay, I know John Goodman is
in it.
Well, he's Fred, right?
Yeah.
Halle Berry is the secretary lady that's, like, all trying to flirt up on John Goodman, and he's like, no, I don't want any of this. Well, no, he's actually is kind of into it, but, like,
In that, like,
yeah.
90s turn of the 2000s
But yeah, no.
way.
Straight man way.
Wow. Anyway, I don't know. Well, maybe we'll have to, like,
Maybe.
watch it just to see what it is.
Oh man.
just to see. Anyway,
They made sequels of that movie.
I remember that.
And a prequel.
they did?
There's a whole franchise. Yeah.
Oh my god, I don't remember any of that though.
They actually brought in the alien in one of them.
There was an alien?
You don't
What
remember
are you talking about?
The Great Gazoo.
No.
Flintstones lore is terrible.
I know. I barely watched it. Anyway, okay.
Tangent.
Mitch, do you know what time it is? It's time for the summarizing.
Okay, so
Summarizing or summarizer?
it's both.
It's fine.
Okay.
The summarizer does the summarizing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, to lay the groundwork, you have to have the most brief of summaries for X-Men.
Yeah.
Basically, fantasy racist right-wing senator gets gay-beamed. Okay, let me take another crack at that one. I mean, I'm not wrong.
The game was too powerful, and
then he melted. I mean, nothing about what I've said is incorrect.
No, it's not.
Okay, the plot of the first X-Men is, loosely, we get introduced to Dr. Xavier's school for
gifted children.
Exceptional children, gifted children, whatever it is. And there is rising tension between the mutant population that is slowly increasing and the, I guess, normie population. And it's actually pretty relevant to today because there's this, like, super mutant racist senator that's, like, trying to introduce legislation against them
and being
and
like,
stuff,
hey, you wouldn't want your kids to be around these freaks, would you?
Yeah.
Sound familiar? Also, but one thing that has changed, he's like talking to somebody on like another senator on the phone, and he's like, I mean, you wouldn't want like, I don't know, like a handgun in schools, would you? Well, these mutant kids are just like that. And I'm like, well,
aged like milk. Anyway. And then Magneto tries to turn the entire island of Manhattan into mutants, and they dramatically defeat him.
Yeah, but very, very importantly, it introduces, for the purposes of X2, it introduces us to Wolverine, and the fact that
Amnesia Boy Prime.
Yes. That he cannot remember, like, he's just this, like, rough and tumble Canadian guy. He gets into, like, cage fights and stuff like that.
No, this is not a summary. It's too late. Wolverine gets introduced. He doesn't remember how he got his metal skeleton. In X2,
yeah.
The tensions between humanity and the mutants are escalating. Somebody brainwashes a mutant to try to kill the president. And there is some kind of like Bourne Identity deep state bullshit happening that the X-Men need to contend with. And to know the rest, you should watch the movie.
Yes. Yeah, please do. Please, honestly, like, the effects in these movies have aged so well.
Yeah, like actually,
so well.
I would say most of these movies have aged reasonably well.
Like, almost on all fronts, actually. Like,
Even the politics, unfortunately, are still relevant.
Yeah. Let's move on into the main course. X2 opens with this really dramatic, really fucking cool, still stands up today action sequence of an attempted assassination on the president. And at first, all you see is this guy in sort of this tan trench coat, and he's wearing, like, his hat really low, and so you can't really see his face.
Standard, I'm totally nondescript costume.
And he's, like, with a tour group, and they're talking about Abe Lincoln and how Abraham Lincoln is like, you know, we must come together, we must not be enemies, blah, 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 blah. Like, Bryan Singer, the director, is really good at sort of having the sort of environmental cues also line up with the themes, which some people might find heavy-handed. I kind of enjoy it.
Well, yeah, it's fun whenever, like, the books the characters are reading or, like, the news broadcasts in the background kind of reinforce the themes.
Yeah.
We won't be commenting on Bryan Singer's personal life in the course of this.
Oh, God. Yeah, we won't be commenting on the director. Yes, but
we can separate the art from the artist in this space.
Yes. So, anyway, pretty quickly it's clear that this guy who's totally normal is not normal. And in fact, he's a teleporter, and he's like teleporting through the halls of the White House.
You're bearing the lead, babe. This is Nightcrawler.
I was gonna get there. But also Nightcrawler is fucking cool.
Yes.
He's like,
Cooked Wagner.
but at the Munich circus, I was known as the amazing Nightcrawler.
Honestly, he's such a sweetheart in this movie once the brain control is over.
Yeah.
Because he's played really brilliantly by Alan Cumming,
Yeah,
actually.
he is. Yeah, yeah. And I think, like, if I had to rate my favorite X-Men top 3, it would be Wolverine, Mystique, and Nightcrawler.
Yeah.
Well, actually, I really like Rogue, too. I really like Rogue. She's somewhere
Top
out there.
4.
Yeah, top 4. But anyway, he's, doing all this crazy teleporting around the White House, and he breaches the Oval Office, and he's very quickly, like, eliminates everybody in the room. He doesn't kill them, he just sort of, like, kicks their ass. And then he pounces on top of the president, and he's about to plunge a knife into the president's chest that says, like, I don't know, mutant justice or mutant freedom now.
Yeah.
But then one of the bodyguards of the president manages to shoot him in the arm, and he, like, sort of snaps out of what we later learn is the mind control he's been under, and he, like, teleports away. But the damage is kind of done. It's not as bad as it could have been, but it's certainly pretty bad.
Yeah, so, like, his teleportation powers are really, really neat in this instance.
Yeah.
In most, like, other kind of characterizations of him, like, he, like, blinks or whatever.
That's
like,
most teleporters. They just, like, boop.
Yeah, they're
somewhere
boop,
else.
or, like, there's a little, like, bright flash or whatever. What they did was do, like, a cool smoke effect where, like, he just kind of turns into smoke and then goes somewhere else and then turns back out from smoke, and it's really cool.
Well, and they make, like, deft use of sort of the smoke left behind to be, like, misdirects and stuff. And honestly, it's gorgeously rendered in this.
Yeah.
And
Beautifully choreographed. too.
yeah,
Yeah.
like, shockingly good CGI for a movie that's going on 20.
Yeah.
Yep.
I mean, it is like 20.
Yeah.
So, cut to Canada. Now we're in the Great Frozen North. And Logan is up here, and he's been looking for answers to his past. And it's led him to this dam called Alkali Lake. But it seems like nothing is up there.
Yeah, it's fairly abandoned. Most of the tech is just kind of, like, withered away or old. It's there, pretty much.
Yeah. And so he's just like, damn. Well, I guess that was a dead end. Incidentally, I think I read, like, a novelization. God, what was it called? I actually really enjoyed this book. It was a novelization of, like, Wolverine's experiences immediately after he escaped from Alkali Lake, after he'd gotten his, like, skeleton. I don't know. It was, like, immediately before or immediately after. I'll have to go find it, because I actually really liked it when I was 15, so who knows. But, and then...
He jumps back onto Cyclops' motorcycle he had stolen from the previous film.
Yeah.
With his stupid hair.
It's some great continuity that
Yeah.
I very much appreciate.
Yeah. And meanwhile, then we go to New York City, where I guess Professor X and Jean and Cyclops and
Storm's there, isn't she?
and Storm are all taking the kiddos out to the museum to learn about stuff.
Yeah, it's field trip day.
Yeah, it's a field trip day, and of course, Iceman and Pyro and Rogue are
They're messing about.
yeah, like stirring up trouble,
They're
or
the
rather,
bad kids in class.
well,
Yeah.
it's really just Pyro.
Yeah,
'Cause,
mostly.
like, Iceman and Rogue are friends with Pyro, but, like, Pyro's the hothead, and so he gets into some trouble.
He's the
in
Bakugo.
Yeah. He gets into trouble in the food court, and they have to leave pretty quickly because when Professor X intervenes by freezing everybody in their steps, which is also a really cool thing he can do, the news breaks that a mutant has just tried to assassinate the president.
And they've just outed themselves as mutants in public
Yeah,
by
very
pranking somebody.
spectacularly, yes. So,
Yeah, there's that whole bit about Jean Grey. and,
Yeah.
so Jean Grey is all, talking to the Cyclops. He's like, oh, what's going on? And she's just having, essentially, she's
having an ADHD episode where you can't filter anything except also it's everybody's thoughts, which would
Yeah.
fucking suck.
Yeah. And she's just like, well, I can't really focus. And she says, I feel like something terrible is about to happen. Mm-hmm. Well, that terrible thing is X3.
We do not talk about
What
X3.
X3?
There is no
Nothing
war
ever-
in Bossing Say.
What are you talking about? Here they kind of introduce that Jean Grey is struggling to control her powers, and Cyclops is basically like, you are not all right. Something is wrong with your powers. And she's like, I've got it under control, but it's clear that she's becoming, like, rapidly more powerful, and she's kind of interested in testing those limits.
Because of course she
is. And then here's fucking Cyclops. I'm gonna let my
let your loyalties loose.
Let my feelings come into this. Okay, like Cyclops, there are some like good things about him.
One of the good things about Cyclops is his eyewear.
Mm-hmm. I mean, yeah.
The rest of them,
styling.
The rest of them, you can just.
Well, I will say
really
that. Actually, I can't say much about Cyclops, but the thing that really chaps me.
Cyclops is the safe choice.
Yeah, he's the safe choice. But the thing that really irritates me about how he is in this movie is he clearly loves her, but he's so safe and he's kind of controlling. He's like, no, don't experiment with your power. Like, deny your potential, shy away from it. Don't use it, because it'll just, like, lead you to ruin or whatever. He's, like, basically kind of trying to stifle her power in a way because it scares him. And, like, true, her power is really scary, but maybe if she had, you know... I don't know.
Experimented with it.
Maybe if she had felt comfortable actually experimenting with it in a safe setting and, like, really felt supported, maybe she wouldn't... Maybe bad things wouldn't have happened later.
Well, did she even talk to Professor X about it at all?
I think Professor X knew it was happening, but he's also, like, Professor X is very much like, people need to make choices. They need to work with their powers, sort of like...
Well, yeah, they need to arrive at things on their own.
On their own terms. And that's a big thing that's going on with him and Logan, Wolverine, at the same time. Because Wolverine, he's like, I need you to read my mind again. So he, you know, whatever. Everybody goes back to the mansion. Logan shows up. And he tells Professor X, nothing was at Alkali Lake. I need you to read my mind again. And Professor X, he kind of actually already knows some of what's up with Wolverine. But he is like, you know, your brain needs to basically give you these memories in its own time, or else it could be damaging.
Could have, negative impacts.
Yeah.
Patrick Stewart as Professor X is some of the best casting ever.
Well, and Ian McKellen as Magneto.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And them together.
Yeah.
It's everything.
They're
together.
so cute.
Yeah.
They really are.
Yeah. I could really buy that they had a relationship.
That there's something unspoken between them.
Yeah. Or maybe spoken at some point, but they have become estranged because they were just way too different. And, like, beyond simply, like, platonic love. You know, you know what I'm saying? That they gay. But yeah, I could see them as being gay. Mm-hmm. So I could really buy
especially, so this is jumping the gun a little bit, but Magneto is such a sassy queen throughout this entire movie.
And in X-Men, really. Like, oh my god, what a performance.
But, like, even more so in this one, because literally at one point, he and Mystique are, like, doing the Mean Girl huddle in the corner of the X-Jet
like,
later.
Tittering.
Yeah, and being like, and then being like, Rogue, we love what you've done with your hair.
Yeah.
Like, what? Like... This is literally like Lindsay Lohan Mean Girls style.
Yeah. Okay, so, sorry, going back to...
Loosely the sequence of events.
Yes.
Well, it goes back, like, the president all having a discussion.
Oh,
yeah.
The
so,
national security.
Yeah.
You know, right, like, after they see the broadcast that the president has been attacked, I think we go to the Oval Office, and this guy comes in, William Stryker, and he's basically like, I told you that this was going to happen, and also Senator Kelly is there.
Well, Senator Kelly was the senator that got gay beamed and melted
in the first
movie. And so Mystique, whose powers are to shapeshift, is
mimicking
Senator Kelly and kind of like pushing legislation into a more pro-mutant direction.
Okay.
And William Stryker comes in, and Senator Kelly, and the president are talking, and basically Stryker is like, look at this. I've been telling you, sir, that, these mutants are a problem, and, like, look at this. Supposedly, these are pictures of a school for mutants But then when you use advanced imagery or whatever, you can see that underneath the basketball court, there's like this fighter jet, which, you know, honestly, like...
That is pretty
sus.
actually.
So Mystique as Senator Kelly just picks up these pictures and she trying to like convince everybody's like, this is just a school.
This is a school.
There's nothing.
Well, trying to run
happen.
interference.
Yeah. And like, props to her. She's kind of being good to the school.
So
well, she fucking cares about
the thing about
children.
the thing about the Brotherhood of Mutants, they take care of their own. They're absolutely ruthless when it comes to normies.
Yeah. But that means that she absolutely cares about the mutant children in Xavier's school. So anyway, she's trying to run interference on that. And while they're talking, Stryker makes mention of Eric Lyncher, that he helped design the prison for Eric Lyncher, aka Magneto, who was taken into custody at the end of the last movie. And
this is a tangent a bit, and maybe stepping on Mitch's toes a little bit too. But how amazing is the plastic prison?
Plastic prison is pretty great.
I mean,
the visual design of the plastic prison that's completely free of metallic.
It has glass in it too.
Yeah,
it's plastic glass. It's pretty good.
It looks so like
the set design on point.
So like kind of mod 60s spy movie kind of thing.
Yeah.
And so like it's this giant cube that's just suspended over this abyss because of course there's an abyss. And like in order to get onto the other side, they have this weird little like tube that just connects from one point to another.
Yeah. I mean, I guess in this version of events, Magneto is not strong enough to use the Earth's magnetic energy to like,
because that's fucking busted.
Well, it is, but like it's so cool.
I mean,
and they do in the prequels, they do actually have him do that.
Well, in these movies, like you were saying earlier, they have things a little bit more grounded. Like, they have
I think they had to do that at the time.
Yeah, they had to limit the amount of powers that somebody has.
I mean, he was already a fucking badass.
Yeah.
Like, even so. Also, this, watching these movies made me, like, obsessed with the comics. So I went back and read the whole omnibus of X-Men comics from the 1960s up to the 1990s, at which point there were so many different storylines and so many different teams and stuff like that I couldn't really like keep up with it.
Well, yeah,
but
so many comic storylines, I think particularly X-Men, just branched off so much in the 90s.
Yeah.
Dude, okay, so slight tangent. Like
this is going to be one for the
90s cartoons. Oh my god.
Okay, so that is probably one exception that I'll have to not being super into superheroes as a kid. I do remember watching parts of the X-Men animated series. Because I still remember the animated opening to that. Yeah, and how, like, honestly kind of incredible it was.
Yeah.
And honestly, Storm has always been one of my favorites.
Oh my god,
just 'cause,
I
mean, she's gorgeous.
She really is. And, like, in the comics, I fucking love her. Also, her outfits are always on point. But yeah, curiously, that was not one of the X-Men media that I voraciously consumed. I think it's probably because, like, at 15, I was like, that's like a cartoon. It's like gonna have like any like real stuff in it.
I mean, we were all shitty teens at one point. It's fine.
Even as a shitty teen, I would watch cartoons.
Yeah, you were shitty about other things.
I watched cartoons, right? But I was like, X-Men is like...
That's like a Saturday morning baby cartoon.
Well, yeah, I was like, I want to see like the adult version of X-Men.
Yeah, which you got.
Which I did, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, also, as Mystique, as Senator Kelly, is sort of plying Stryker for information about Magneto's whereabouts and his prison, she also meets William Stryker's assistant, who is this like young woman who I don't remember. Oh God, I can't remember her name right now. But like, he introduces her and she shakes Senator Kelly's hand / Mystique's hand, and it's like, oh, you've got a strong handshake, and we'll learn why later. But she's also a fucking badass.
Well, I mean, she's introduced popping all of her digits.
Like, just
and
like...
it's very crunchy.
Yeah, it's very visceral.
And
if knuckle popping bothers you, this is going to be awful.
Yeah, it's going to be tough. back at the mansion, Bobby and Rogue, Iceman and Rogue, are kind of like, they are kind of in a relationship, and they're sort of like thumb wrestling or whatever and being cute. And there's this moment where they might kiss, but like Rogue draws back because like
She'll probably kill him.
But he doesn't seem to get that through his like hormone-addled
He's a
brain.
teenage boy.
Yeah, I mean, Iceman, all this stuff strikes me as very like normal teen mistakes, so I'm not even gonna be like mad about it. But then Rogue hears the roaring of an engine off in the distance, and she pops right up and she runs to the door, and it's Logan, and he's returned from
and
like
her hot for teacher crush comes roaring back.
Well, she definitely has like this very teen like hero worship of him, where she loves him and is maybe in love with him, whereas he like loves her, but he's very much like, she is
like a niece.
Yeah, she's a kid to him. But he cares about her deeply, and he will literally die for her.
And kill.
So he will die and kill. And, I think that's just another thing that I responded to, is like, yes, a man who will die and kill. Who will, like, he is not like the other X-Men.
We just need to neutralize the threat.
Yeah, he'll, like, neutralize them, but, like, detain them, and then, like, humanely release them back into, the world. No. Wolverine is like, if you fucking dare, I will slaughter you all.
He's an ethical serial killer at this point.
And, like, I don't know, like, but I kind of respect that. Like, and honestly, like, I think one of the interesting things in X-Men and X2 is how, like, Wolverine is just on the side of the X-Men, because he could very easily have also tipped over into the Brotherhood of Mutants side, where he's just like, yeah, they hate us, and I will protect mutant children, and I will, whatever, I have no problems with killing people who want to kill me or mine.
I think the reason why he sided with the X-Men this time was because Magneto was about to use Rogue, like, kill Rogue.
Well, he manipulated Rogue.
His sort of, like, moment of decision for that, number one, Magneto never really tried that hard to win Logan over, though I suppose
he's basically just like, if you're coming, you're coming.
And ultimately, kind of like, Logan at heart is basically like, on his own, he would have never chosen a side. He would have just been alone. But yeah, for him, he was like, you talk a good game, Magneto, about caring about mutant children and mutant lives, and then you use a mutant child. You're perfectly willing to, like, kill this mutant child to achieve your goals. And so that's for him, like, that exposes just the flaw in Magneto's ethics that he can't follow, that he can't get on board with. So he aligns with the X-Men, even if he doesn't always, like, agree with their kid glove methods.
Yeah, and, like, that's kind of, like, the interesting tension throughout the X-Men movie adaptations. Because it's fairly easily argued that Wolverine is the main character of the film adaptation.
Yes, correct.
Not even thematically, but for the fact that he's gotten so many solo spin-offs as well.
Yeah. And, well, I think he also, like, despite being a Canadian, kind of appeals to that, like,
American rough and tumble.
American, like, rugged individualism that can very quickly tip over into, like, a toxic, isolating kind of thing, and is like a hair's breadth away from unhinged like at any moment, which is not great. But
well, he even gets to rock the cowboy hat and duster look periodically, like,
in the comics
he's the most American Canadian.
Anyway, so he shows up. Rogue is just like, hi, Logan. He's like, hey, kid. And then Jean Grey shows up, and he's like, hey,
Jean. Drooling immediately.
And Cyclops is like, oh.
You stole my motorcycle.
That's just his face.
I mean, face like a puckered anus. Sorry.
And then, so Jean is actually, like, heading down the stairs because she's about to go on a mission with Storm to go find the teleporter who tried to kill the president and figure out, like, what's what with that.
And important plot-wise here is the way that they have tracked the teleporter is that Professor X has been using Cerebro and
Yes.
demonstrated in handy color-coded for your convenience mapping of the globe. I can tell where all mutants and all humans are at any given time
Yes.
using Cerebro. This is important for later, so hold that in the back of your mind.
Yeah.
Mind. Cerebro, just to kind of give you,
Oh, yeah.
give you like a general idea of what it is. It's this giant
Geodesic dome.
It's like a metal snow globe.
Yeah.
And Professor X sits in the center, and he attaches himself to it. Like, he has, like, these wire things that attach to his brain, and he's able to concentrate and be like, oh, well, I'm having a hard time, deciding where this person is. And Logan just casually says, well, why don't you just concentrate harder? And he's like, if I wanted to kill him, I would.
Yeah.
Yes. That's also important.
Also,
It's basically a psychic satellite dish.
important to note, Magneto helped him build Cerebro.
He knows how it works.
And he knows all the stuff about it. Which brings us back to Magneto, who is, as it turns out, being abused, of course, by his jailers.
And it turns out one of those jailers is Stryker.
Yeah, one of those jailers is Stryker, and he's using
Doses him with, like,
this weird,
brain control juice.
Yeah, brain control juice
Brain
to...
control juice? You don't say.
Yeah, he uses this, like, brain control juice to get Magneto to cooperate and tell him everything he wants to know about Professor X's school or Cerebro or, anything else. And that's not good. We don't like that. We don't like that very much. So, yeah, Jean and Storm head off. Cyclops and Professor X head out to go see Magneto because they've been visiting periodically from time to time. And pretty quickly, Professor X zeroes in on something being very wrong. And Magneto, he sees that there's this big bruise across his face, and he's like, oh my god, what are they doing to you? And I guess he probably, reads Magneto's mind a little bit, and he's like, what have you done? And Magneto's like, I'm sorry, Charles, I couldn't stop myself or whatever. And then the whole compartment is flooded with gas, and he passes out, and Cyclops tries to save him, but then Stryker's bodyguard lady comes in and she whoops Cyclops' ass, and they're down for the count.
This is one of my more favorite parts of this movie. Whenever Cyclops just
Gets his ass beat.
He gets his ass beat, and he is no longer in the film until the finale.
Yeah, he doesn't really get to kick any ass in this movie. He
really doesn't.
And that's because
He gets completely sidelined.
Properly
Yeah.
deserved.
yeah. Nothing against James Marsden, who is a fine actor.
Yeah, no beef
I
there.
enjoy him.
Just,
Yeah.
Cyclops is always obnoxious.
Yeah. So then, so Jean and Storm have found the teleporter, the mutant, and they manage to
They track him down to
this abandoned cathedral.
So if you ever seen the very first Daredevil, I'm pretty sure they just lifted the exact church from
well, yeah, I'm sure it's
that,
the same set.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Jean's like, well, I can't really track him too terribly well. And Storm, is able to see him and just obliterates part of the
so
banister or whatever.
she calls some lightning in, and it just obliterates this cathedral's priceless beams in the the vault, and he the teleporter Kurt falls down, and Jean catches him with her
Psychic
greater
powers.
telekinetic powers that she's beginning to unlock,
Which also prevents him from teleporting.
yes
Yeah.
Because she's got a lock on him.
Yeah, but they begin talking to him, and he's a very nice guy for somebody who tried to assassinate.
He's a sweet boy.
He is a sweet
He is
bean.
Cute.
And in the comics, Nightcrawler usually either has blue skin or blue fur, which I can't remember the artist right now, but one of the
The
artists,
thirsty fan art.
yeah, one of the artists, there was this artist that was doing this really good cover art for him, but also did some thirst traps, and Kurt looked real good for a fuzzy blue guy. So-
You're saying the fuzz is a detractor.
Anyway. So, but in this version, he has blue skin, but he also has this scarification that he's done on him.
It's like
that's
angelic script.
angelic
or something.
script, yeah, and like it's like one for every sin or whatever. And
Because
he
he's
is
super
deeply
Catholic.
religious,
Yeah.
and that's true in the comics as well. He's deeply religious there, but he's very like optimistic and happy-go-lucky, and he's a sweet bean. And they notice that on the back of his neck, there's this weird like mark, this weird like circular, like almost like burn scar, like an acid burn.
Yeah, if you'd ever like picture somebody getting burnt with a cigarette, that's kind of a very similar idea.
Yeah. And he explained that he could see himself doing all these things to try to kill the president, but he couldn't stop himself, and it was like a nightmare, and he didn't want to do it. And then they point out this little like thing, and we're beginning to sort of connect some dots here that maybe,
because it's the same scar that Magneto had from the brain control juice.
although Jean and Storm don't know that yet.
Yeah, they don't
but
know
the
that.
audience.
But the audience does. So while Jean and Storm are doing this, Mystique is doing her thing. And she's so good at her thing. Like, first she breaks into Stryker's office by impersonating his bodyguard. And then she goes into Stryker's office just to find the blueprints for Magneto's prison and like the location and stuff. But then she notices that there's a file called Cerebro. And she's like, what the hell's that doing here? And she pulls it up and she starts like kind of seeing all these plans and being like, what the fuck? And so she starts printing that
building
off
another
too.
one.
Meanwhile, the real bodyguard lady starts like coming down into the office, and then there's like this tense moment where you think that, she's going to be discovered, but then Mystique transforms into the janitor that she saw coming in, and she's like, oh yeah, I was just taking out the trash. And then like she manages to get away and walks right past the real janitor, and the real janitor is just like,
He does a
He's like,
take.
what the?
yeah. So then she impersonates a really hot lady, and
Seduces one of Magneto's prison guards.
yeah, the prison guard that we've been seeing multiple times, like beaten up on Magneto, she like goes and finds him, seduces him, and then roofies him and injects him full of like just this like huge syringe of iron,
An iron
or
compound.
something.
It would have to be a compound, because pure iron would just have immediately
Killed him. Yeah.
So a few comments on Mystique's transformation and stuff like that.
Oh,
It is
so good.
gorgeous.
So
It's
good.
fucking gorgeous. And not to mention, in a few key scenes, when it's just her being, Senator Kelly or Stryker, occasionally the actors will, like, hip bob.
Yeah, there'll be a little hip swaggle
Yeah.
as they're trying to
Which
imitate
is like
Mystique, which is a great
props to
attention to
them.
detail there.
Yeah.
And also, I think the actress that they use to inject him, I think is actually the actress, like, without the makeup.
Yeah, I think that might be the case.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wasn't
and
she
she's
a
like a
gymnast or
hottie.
something?
Yeah, something.
she
She's a
had
model
to
or
have
something.
been.
She must have been. She's also
The athleticism.
she's also
on display.
number 1 on Strange New Worlds.
Oh shit! That's why she's gorgeous.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So
Yeah, Mystique is
I also just love her as a character.
Yeah.
She's just like great.
like Jennifer Lawrence Mystique is also pretty good, but I think I prefer this version just because
She is just so like
She's so
focused, sassy, like
well, she
in
just
charge,
kind of exudes dangerous sex.
and like confidence, and just
Yeah.
like man.
I
Yeah.
don't think Jennifer Lawrence really had it though.
Well,
Like, she
but
had
her
a little bit.
character wasn't
it,
at
it was
that
rendered different,
point.
Yeah.
and also younger,
Yeah.
notably.
Yeah. Point valid. Very valid.
So Professor X and Cyclops have been abducted at this point, although I guess nobody knows that yet. I don't
Yeah.
know. And this guy goes in to start his shift, and he's bringing some food into Eric. And
Eric Magneto.
Magneto. Magneto is just like, there's something different about you today. And he's like, whatever, shut up, sit back down. And Magneto's like, I don't think I will. And he literally levitates the guy off the floor and rips all the iron out of his blood, which is like so badass, but also like, whoa, what the fuck? But also like, well, I don't know, he was like beating the shit out of you. So like,
Yeah.
Okay, so a very brief aside from the biochemist at the table. Your blood already has a ton of iron in it. Could Magneto just technically, like, bloodbend anybody?
Some iterations. I'm
in some
pretty sure.
iterations, yeah, he could.
Okay.
Yeah.
I
he
needed
could.
to ask.
I mean, he is legit one of the most powerful mutants in the X-Men world. Basically, wherever you look, if he exists, he's one of the most powerful for a reason.
Yeah.
Because it's fucking OP. So yeah, then he forms these like 3 little rotating metal
Orbs of
balls
doom.
that he just uses to like shatter his prison and then like levitate across the whole like giant chasm to get out, and he fucking gets jail sprung.
The sequence is actually really cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like they're orbiting like electrons around an atom, and just like
He's just sitting there, just like, just
completely calm.
And he's like,
serene.
he's giddy.
He's
even.
just like,
he's
this
just
is
like
great.
beaming from ear to ear, like ha.
I figured it out, fools, and
Yeah,
has his arms folded.
I knew she would come for me.
After that, it cuts back to the school.
Yes.
With Logan and Iceman
Yeah.
sitting in a kitchen.
So nobody can sleep in this house, apparently. Well,
Yeah.
I guess like plenty of people are sleeping, but there's quite a few who are up.
Insomniacs.
And Logan's kind of wandering around, and he comes into the kitchen, and Iceman is there eating some ice cream, and he's like, is there any beer in here? And Iceman is just like, dude, like, this is a school. And he's like, so there's no beer? And he's like, yeah.
And so he gets like a soda or whatever.
But it's warm.
It's very hot, and he's just like, would you mind? And
Yeah,
Iceman
and
just
Iceman
like
just blows
breathe-
on it,
Yeah,
and it's all icy, which is like really cute.
Previously, Iceman was kind of like clowning on Logan because he was jealous of Rogue's hot for teacher crush, but he has seen through the error of his ways at this point and pulls the bro move of chilling his beer for him.
Also, like, side note, I had the biggest crush on Anna Paquin, like the actress
I
from
mean,
Rogue.
she's adorable
She's so
in these
precious.
movies, and that southern accent, so endearing.
Yeah.
Back in the day when
Like,
I was
I wonder if this part kind of helped like land her Sookie Stackhouse.
I've never seen that movie.
It's not a movie, it's a show. It's True Blood.
Oh,
She's the main gal in True Blood.
is she really?
Yes.
I've seen True Blood maybe once or twice, but I never actually paid attention
Okay,
to
like
it.
the first season is actually like legit really good.
And the second season is still pretty good.
2 and 3 are like passable. It starts getting a little crazy
It
after
goes to a
that.
shit show after season 3. I want you to imagine Wolverine going, Suki.
Oh my god!
What's that face?
I don't know.
Did I hit that bill tone correctly?
Oh my god!
Did I get it?
But danger is afoot. Danger is afoot. So Stryker's team, like the president basically was like, okay, go ahead and go in, Stryker, but I don't want you to like kill any of those kids. I just want you to like detain them, which
That's aged poorly and also really well. Something kids in cages.
the more things change, the more they stay the same. Anyway, so
Okay. This isn't a
There-
politics
you know-
podcast.
yeah, this isn't political. Just keep telling yourself that. So Logan, part of his mutant gifts is like, he heals really fast, and he has a heightened sense of hearing and smell. And so
Animalistic superpowers.
yeah.
So, speaking of animalistic superpowers, it's interesting to keep note that some of the background media, like, kind of alludes
Yes,
to some
yeah.
of this. So,
Yeah.
so while we're talking about the animals and stuff like that, there's actually a nature documentary happening.
I love
like,
this
next
part,
door.
yeah. Like, one of the kids is watching a nature documentary because he can't sleep. I think he literally cannot sleep. And it's talking about, like, but while the mother, rodent is away, her babies are helpless. And he, like, this kid hears a sound, and he wanders out into the hallway, and he's, all these flashlights are,
He gets trank darted.
like, in his eyes, and he's like, hi. And then they fucking trank dart him, which I'm just like,
Yeah.
you guys, what the fuck? Like, you're looking in the face of the child, and
Well, at least this child is now asleep.
Oh yeah. This is probably the
and
first time he's slept in years.
and you kind of like get the impression that maybe something is like wrong because his like eyelids are like fluttering like weirdly and stuff like
Yeah.
that. Anyway, because he probably shouldn't sleep, whatever his power is. I don't actually know who he's supposed to be. I think like a lot of the kids, like they are actually characters in other
Yeah, we
X-Men
could probably look it
media,
up,
but-
but it's not
Yeah.
salient here.
But Logan, with his heightened hearing, hears something's wrong, and he kind of goes ballistic.
Rightfully so.
Rightfully so.
But he
because there's
definitely
like
murders
intruders
some
coming in,
dudes here.
and yeah, like because they try to get him, but he's like got that ultra healing factor, and so none of those tranq darts really do much to him. It like his system like counteracts it pretty fast. So he's just like, "Rah!" And then he starts going berserk.
He's all like, Iceman is hunkering underneath the island after he
kitchen.
murdered.
After Wolverine has literally just like brutally murdered a guy in the
Right
kitchen.
in front of him. And
He's like, "You
I
okay?"
have trauma now.
and Iceman's like, yeah. And he's like, okay, like let's go get everybody. And one of the commando guys, they also accidentally wake up this one girl who
The Banshee girl.
yeah, who screams and wakes everybody else up because she has like a supersonic scream until they
Trank her,
trank
too.
her. But now the jig is up. Everybody
The kids are on
is
the move,
awake,
yeah.
and they are running off. And Colossus is there, and Colossus is like,
Okay, Colossus is technically one of the students, I think.
Yeah.
But they did not cast a teenager for that role, because I don't know if anybody under the age of teen can have rippling abs like that.
yeah.
Yeah, he was sculpted.
well, maybe if you're a mutant, but like,
And maybe if you're a mutant.
And actually-
but the human actor that they picked, I think, was at least 25.
in the X-Men, in the generation that Wolverine and Storm were introduced, Colossus was also one of that team, but they chose to make him a kid here. Anyway, so he's like kind of leading the charge. Like some of the commandos try to like shoot him, but he just like turns into
Well, he does
metal.
this Colossus thing, yeah.
And then he's like, bam, bam. And I guess like he knows where like this secret escape tunnel is. And he, along with like Wolverine, starts like shepherding the kids that way. And Colossus is like, I can stay and help you to Wolverine. Wolverine is just like, help them.
Yeah.
And redirects him out.
Yeah.
And
Goes and attacks more people, and it's
yeah,
great.
yeah, and
he's really good at it.
Yeah, like Bobby and Pyro go to find Rogue. They have been separated from the rest of them. They get surrounded by all these soldiers, and then Wolverine just goes "Rah!" and like jumps down
up.
on them in like a really cool action scene, and like just
he-
kills them all.
He jumps down, jumps on top of them, and just starts like stabbing everybody. and
Wolverine
it's great.
gets his iconic... I feel like Wolverine's most iconic pose is him in the air with his, like, claws akimbo and his, like, little feet tucked up under...
Yeah, he do like to jump or be thrown at
Yeah.
people.
fastball special.
It's
Yeah,
like a
it
whole thing
is.
for him.
He murders all these people. He starts to get Iceman, Rogue, and Pyro out. He like takes them to the tunnel, and he's like, "You guys go ahead. I'll take care of this." And they're like, "You need to come with us." And he's like, "Get out of here. I will take care of this. I will." He's basically like, "I will not stop until I kill them all."
and
Which,
so,
like, damn. He's like, "You come into my house?
Yeah.
You try to like hurt my kids?"
which gives us to a bright flash in the doorway. Wolverine.
Yeah, and
yeah.
Stryker has arrived at the scene, and he's like, "Wolverine, my, you haven't aged a day," or whatever. And he's like, "Me, you know."
And Logan's like,
And Logan's like, "Who are you?" But he
And why do you
recog-
know me?
Yeah, but he recognizes something about him. It's like he recognizes his voice or something. And he wants answers so badly that for a moment he sort of like lets his guard down. And
he was about to like
he's about to, I don't know, like, I
walk over to him
yeah.
and like start doing more stuff.
well, talk to him. I don't even know.
Yeah.
I don't know if he knew what he was gonna do. But like he's kind of like frozen, and then Iceman like creates a like ice wall between him and Stryker, and it kind of like snaps Wolverine out of it, and he's like, "Okay, I guess I ought to like go help these kids instead of look for answers to my past."
Practical effect wise, this ice wall is really cool and really well done.
Yeah.
I like
well, I'm pretty sure it's a digital effect.
No,
Was it a
no,
digital?
I think it's digital and
It might have been a
practical.
composite.
Okay, so
Yeah.
it might have been whenever it was forming digital.
Yes.
And then whenever it was a solid piece, it was actually physical.
I agree with that. I think
Yeah.
the formation was a render.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, yeah, because they couldn't do that like,
Well, yeah.
for reals. But they hop into one of Cyclops' cars.
They steal his shit again. It's a great running gag.
Wolverine
Please
steals
keep
his
doing
shit
this.
again.
Yes.
And speed away. And Wolverine's like, we'll head to Boston because that's basically the last place that I know Jean and Storm were. And Bobby's like, well, my family's in Boston. And they're like, who was that guy back there? And Wolverine's just like, I can't remember. And yeah, so he's trying to figure out how to activate this like little phone looking thing.
It's a walkie-talkie. Let's not be too fancy.
By the way, so Pyro's more of a character in this in this movie, and he's the actor that ends up going on to play like the main guy in the Sci-Fi 12 Monkeys TV show. And I just realized that.
Shit.
Yeah, on
All
like
right.
this watch through, and I was like, oh my god, that's, I thought I recognized you. But they head over to Bobby's house, I guess, and Jean and Storm are up in the air.
In the X-Jet.
Yeah, in the X-Jet with
flying.
Kurt.
Let's clarify that, because
and they can't get a hold of anybody, so they're really confused. And there's this interesting exchange that happens between Storm and Kurt, who Kurt is very much, you have to...
Can't we all just get along?
Yeah, can't we all just get along? I pity the people who oppress us because they don't understand, and they'll never know the wonder, and which is very nice and very thoughtful and idealistic. But Storm is just like, well, I'm fucking angry.
And honestly, Texas.
Yeah, she's like, sometimes anger is what helps you survive when people are trying to hurt you. And I was like, yeah, these are both valid points.
Yeah.
Which is one of the cool things about X-Men, is it does actually kind of try to explore the nuance of all the different ways that you deal with being a minority that is threatened.
And acknowledging it's a complicated question.
Yeah, acknowledging that it's complicated.
Yep.
And that multiple viewpoints are valid and necessary, and no one is the only
probably
one
the answer.
that you need.
Yeah, you probably need all of them in some measure. But anyway, so go back to Bobby, Wolverine, Pyro, Rogue.
The road trip.
They take a road trip over to see Bobby's family, and
Notably, Bobby's family thinks he goes to a gifted kids school.
Yeah,
they are not aware that he goes to a mutant
they don't
kids
know
school.
that he's a mutant. And so they come home, I guess the mutants arrive there before. They're out somewhere to church or whatever.
I think Bobby led them there on the assumption that they were going to be out for a while. And they could just hide out at his house for a little bit.
Maybe. I don't think so. I think he knew that his parents were there, and this was that's why it was so he was reluctant to offer it, but he was also this is
what we've got.
This is what we got. Which props to him. Basically, once they come in and they see this literally strange man, which is Wolverine,
drinking a beer in
their
Running
fridge.
gag of Logan always
The
looking
quest
for
for beer.
Logan's quest for beer is a running joke throughout this entire film. It's great.
Yeah. And he basically has to come out to them as being a mutant.
Well,
Mom, Dad, I'm a mutant.
So, and they're like, have you tried not being a mutant?
Well, no, okay. Beforehand, they try to pass the whole idea of it's still a school, and so it's oh yeah, this is Logan. He's one of my professors, and they turn to him.
What do you teach?
Art.
Yeah, he just instantly is art.
Yes.
I'm like, man, can you imagine Logan the art teacher?
Man, Logan would definitely have
He'd be
a Bob
that
Ross
cool
moment.
He'd be that cool motorcycle guy. Yeah. Oh yeah.
He'd be a sculptor.
Yeah.
But a sculptor,
I feel like he is clay
sculptor
and wood.
vibes. Yeah.
That's
I
his
think
thing.
there is actually literally in the comics there's an iteration
He
where
gets to
he's
do a chainsaw sculpture thing.
yeah, except with his claws.
Yeah.
He makes the
Amazing.
best. Anyway, I'm like, yay, give that boy some happiness. So, but it turns out that Bobby's brother is a
Fascist.
fascist.
Because he calls the fucking cops.
Yeah, he's really mad. He's super anti-mutant. You can tell that Bobby's family is very NIMBY,
Not in my backyard.
anti-mutant people. But they're they're not quite extremists, but they're definitely on the side of
they're kinda
suspicious.
They're kind of the sci-fi equivalent of the casual racist.
Yeah.
I'm not going to say anything, but I'm not comfortable with this.
Yeah. And they're like, I mean, don't you think that it's kind of gone a bit far? And he's like, what?
What do you mean? This is a part of my physical being.
Also, Pyro has this interesting moment, too, where you can tell, like, Pyro's clearly, like, had a difficult past, because he's looking at all of Iceman's family photos, and you can tell that there's some, like, jealousy there.
Bitterness.
So they're all talking in the living room. Bobby's brother storms off, and then he, like, fucking... like
He
a little
narcs.
narc fascist, calls the cops, and he's like, there's people at our house and they won't let us leave. So the police show up, and as the police do, they make everything worse.
Yeah.
As they do in such situations. They don't de-escalate, they super escalate. So
Well, they, like, bust in through the
there's,
window and, like, swat the family.
yeah, and Logan and the kids come out on the porch, and Logan has his hand knives out, his, like, claws out, because he doesn't know what to expect. He doesn't know if these are like commando guys that are, like, off the books and gonna, like, try to black bag them.
Drop the knives.
I can't.
Yeah, he tries to be very calm and be like, I can't drop the knives. And so he lifts his hands to just sort of, like, put them away or whatever. And the twitchy cop on his right shoots him in the fucking head and drops him in front of these children.
Speaking of things that have both aged poorly and unfortunately well.
Yeah, like, it's still fucking relevant. So he's down for the count, at least for a minute.
Well,
and
and notably, the kids assume he's dead because nobody knows he can recover.
yeah,
from
nobody
this.
knows how far his, like, healing ability can go.
Yeah.
So Iceman and Rogue start to, like, get on the ground
They hit the
because
deck,
because they're trying to follow instructions. But Pyro is just like, baby, like, all those bad mutants they're telling you about, I'm one of them. And he, like, whips out his lighter and just, like, starts, like, flame,
blowing out cop cars.
He blows up the cop cars. He throws one back into the house. Strangely enough, the house doesn't go alight. At least he has a little bit of control.
I think he
over his
used,
powers.
like, the pressure to, like,
Backdraft.
push
Which,
some
like,
people down.
there's this interesting moment because, like, I feel like the initial volley here is justified because he's just like, we need to get out of here.
Yeah.
Let's blow them back.
But
then
then
he has this moment where, like, a little sadistic streak
you can
takes
see,
over.
like, the gleam in his eye, and he
Because he,
starts
like,
being
has
like,
this,
"Ah!"
like, sustained flamethrower blast on a cop car that has two people in it.
And, like,
are
trying to
just
roast
like,
them?
basically bake them.
Yeah.
And then Rogue, having her powers be what they are.
Which is that she can temporarily absorb powers from other mutants.
But it also absorbs life force.
Yeah.
With potential negative health consequences. She grabs his ankle and snuffs all the fire
Takes
out.
control of the fires. But, like, the police now have realized the error of their ways. And
No, they haven't. They're just retreating.
yeah, they're stunned. Yes, they're not getting up anytime soon. And by this point, Logan's regenerative abilities have, like, pushed the bullet out of his head, and he's, like, back online. And he just sort of, like, cracks his neck. And, like,
The cop who shot him is scared shitless, and this is hilarious.
and-
He just stands up and in front of the kids again, and they're like,
what? Yeah.
And right before all this shit went down, by the way, he finally got in touch with Jean and Storm. And like, with that little, like, cell phone thingy.
So the jet's on its way.
So the jet's on its way, and the jet arrives on this fucking scene where there's those, like, smoking
it
cop
lands in the
cars
middle of
and
the suburban
shit.
street, like this fucking SR-71 Blackbird
Yeah.
lands on, like, Peach Street in Boston.
Yeah, and picks him up, and they're like, "Okay, we
Bye!
better
We're
fucking
running from the
bounce."
cops
Yeah.
now.
So everybody gets in the jet. There's Kurt there, which, like, none of them know, and they're like, "What the fuck?" Okay.
the amazing Nightcrawler.
Yeah.
Well, it's halfway between who the fuck are you and what the fuck are you, because he's, like, the least human-looking mutant they've encountered so far.
Yeah. So they fly off, but of course now this is a fucking, like, incident.
Yeah.
So
Capital
these
I incident.
fighter jets come after them, and there's another really cool scene where
Storm finally gets a moment.
she
She
gets
calls
a
down, like,
moment.
multiple tornadoes to take out the fighter
Yeah,
jets.
and she almost
while flying the plane.
she almost succeeds, but then, like, one of them gets a target lock and a shot
they
off
get multiple
before.
missiles off. And Jean's able to neutralize all but one of them.
Yeah, all but one with her, like, crazy mind powers, but she flubs the last one, and it doesn't directly hit them, but it blows up, like, right on top of their jet, and it rips the roof off, and everything instantly depressurizes.
Rogue gets sucked out, and then
because
Kurt,
she has her
she
gloves
couldn't
on
buckle in at the time.
her gloves kind of mess with her dexterity, and there's like these 4 different straps, and she's panicking.
It's
so
this whole thing,
she didn't like click it together, and like right before they think they're gonna die, like Logan and Jean exchange this look. By the way,
longing look. The longing.
And then Rogue is sucked out, and Logan is just like, ah! But then Kurt, because he's a teleporter, like can see her, and he like teleports, grabs her, and like teleports back into the jet. But they're still falling, and there's really like they're just like, oh my god, we're gonna die. Yeah,
they're dead stick. They are plummeting towards the ground.
Yeah.
Enter Deus Ex Machina.
Yes.
Deus Ex Magneto.
Yeah.
Literally the tip of the jet freezes feet away from his extended hand. I don't know why he and Mystique just happened to be walking across that part of forest in Massachusetts that day, but lo and behold, there they were.
Yeah, that's like the one thing that they do not explain very well.
It's the biggest hand wave in the entire plot.
But there he is. And as a dramatic bitch, he like lets it get like within feet of his hand, and then he's just like looking up at them in the cockpit being like, oh, when will these people learn how to fly?
He's such a sassy bitch.
So I just want to picture him and Mystique just sitting there like on this
roasting
hill,
some marshmallows
and watching like
watching the tornadoes and the missiles. Oh, would you look at that?
So
Jesus.
But
what a queen.
Anyway, so Magneto kind of like fixes up like part of their jet,
but it's
they're grounded.
Yeah.
They are getting ready. They talk to Magneto because they're like, God damn it! I guess we have to fucking talk to you because you saved us.
We have the unlikely alliance because now they have common interests.
Yeah, and Mystique and Magneto explain that basically
Stryker is an asshole and he needs to go down.
Yeah,
and everyone can basically agree on this.
And that he has made a base at Alkali Lake underneath, because like Wolverine's like, I went there, and he's like, well, you didn't look underneath the facility.
Go deep enough,
yeah, and so all this stuff is underground. They've made a new Cerebro. Magneto's like, he wants to use Professor X to wipe out all mutants using Cerebro and this like mind control goo stuff. So, temporarily, their interests are aligned. And then you have this moment between Wolverine and Jean, and they're talking, and Wolverine's like, are you okay? He's really trying to be like, no, for real, are you okay? Mm-hmm. That was some crazy power up there, which is great, but are you okay, honey?
Which is something that Scott has never asked her.
Yeah. I don't know. Well, rather, he doesn't ever frame her power as being good, but Wolverine's clearly like, that. I mean, that was pretty fucking lit. That was pretty cool.
But are you okay?
But are you okay? Because that was also, I'm sure that was really taxing. And she's like, well, it wasn't enough. And he's like, hey, you got us through. I'm like, again, he's actually being this is like supportive and being like not letting her beat herself up, which I feel like because Cyclops is like sort of a control freak, that he doesn't really know how to deal with that, or maybe even reinforces her being like, that wasn't enough or whatever. So they share a kiss. They share a kiss, and it's a really good kiss. And she explains to him.
She's saying something about how, she's like, well, I need to have a good guy, and he's like, I could be a good guy. Yeah. And she's like, come on, like Logan. And she's like, the good guy sticks around. And one thing that Logan is really good at doing is he goes his own way. And she's like, the bad guy's fun. I need a guy who stays. And he's like, well, and he's not sure if he can do that yet. He is still very torn between sort of like these growing relationships and attachments to these people and the need to distance himself and find answers and figure out who he was before and yada, yada, yada. And he doesn't really know who he is at this point. He knows who he kind of knows who he was, and then he actually has no idea who he was, and he doesn't really know who he wants to be. And Jean, she doesn't know what she wants either, to embrace her power or to turn away from it. And she
I think part of her doesn't really know what to do with Logan and Scott.
Yeah.
And right here, though, she is making a decision, and she's saying, like, he kisses her, and she's like, Logan, don't make me do this.
Yeah.
And he's like, what? And she's like, this, and she walks away. And so he goes into his tent, and he's kind of like mulling over this whole thing, and then
Something about
fucking
pitching a tent. Yeah.
so but
Gene,
then Gene
quote unquote,
comes into his tent, and he's like, I'm so sorry. And then she's just like starts like fucking making out with him, and he's like, yes, okay, I'll go with this. And he starts putting his hand up her shirt, and then he feels these scars on her, and the scars that he gave Mystique at
In the first one.
Yeah, end of the first movie. And she's like, no one's ever left a mark quite like you. And the thing is, Mystique is like fucking hot for anybody who can best her. Like, she is like, I know you like literally stabbed me through the heart, like you tried to kill me, but like that was so hot.
And honestly, girl, same.
Yeah. And she's like, she's basically like, well, who do you want me to be? And she
Shifting around.
She shifts between Jean and then Storm and then Rogue, and like you can see Wolverine's face is just kind of horrified by the last one.
Yeah.
And in my headcanon, she also turned into Scott.
Because that would be
That would've been
funny.
Well, she does. He pushes her off of him, and then she turns into Stryker, and she's like, "What do you really want, Logan?" And he's like, "Get the fuck out!" Essentially, and he's just like, "Jesus Christ!"
At
Like,
least Stryker didn't try to fuck him.
yeah. So then the next day, I guess Jean has fixed up the jet, and they're going to Alkali Lake, and they're making their plans, and blah 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 blah. And like, oh god, we've been going for a while now, so I'm gonna skip ahead a little bit.
They find the secret base and they infiltrate it.
They find the secret base, they infiltrate. Mystique,
And
is a
Mystique
fucking
once again
badass.
comes in clutch by like locking down their entire surveillance core.
Yes, she
and
like
all the cameras.
Okay, so you need to back up a little bit whenever she's like revealed to be, Mystique as Wolverine, because Stryker's just like,
I know my work. That isn't it. Kill it. And but she's just like, she's not bothered by
she's
it.
like, whatever.
She's like, what the fuck ever, man.
and she transforms back into Mystique and starts wrecking shit and gets into their she gets into like the control room as Stryker this time, and she's just yawning as she like
Effortlessly dispatches the guards.
yeah, and then Stryker runs down the hall as she's closing the
And
the
sees
door
himself.
and sees himself, and she just like blows him a kiss in his
It's
as
iconic.
him like waves at him, and it's just like,
Wait,
God, I love her.
When was the moment whenever she's baseball sliding underneath one of the closing
Oh
doors?
yeah, and she's like, flipping people off, and I'm
it's
just
so
like, God
good.
damn, Mystique. And I'm
I
like,
could just watch multiple movies of her alone.
sometimes I'm
honestly.
like, damn, Wolverine. I mean, you could have a bad bitch.
Yeah.
Like,
Well,
and
they kind of tease that in like the future movies of like Days and Future Past.
yeah, they do, and
They play in that a little bit more.
and in the comics House of M, at least temporarily, Wolverine and Mystique are together, and I'm
I
like,
can see it.
damn.
Although I will say it again, my Wolverine OTP is with Hercules.
yeah, that's cute. Yeah.
Because that is the only person, aside from maybe Mystique, who can survive all the bullshit
Yeah,
that happens
for
to
real.
Wolverine.
Like, that's the thing. I fucking love Wolverine. I want him to be happy, but like
Everybody he
literally
loves
every
dies.
single like adult woman that he has like a relationship with gets fucking killed horribly.
He is a gravity well of man pain.
Yeah.
Any stray man pain floating by gets sucked towards him.
But he's also like ultimate tired dad sort of, because
Yes.
like he adopts a lot of like teenage girls and teaches them how to kick ass and protect themselves, and they all survive.
Yeah.
So like,
Well,
yay.
yeah, like, we were talking about this the other day, actually. We're kind of going through, like, a tired dad renaissance right now. Because we've got The Mandalorian and Baby Yoda.
Last of Us.
We have The Last of Us with Joel and Ellie. We have...
That's just Pedro Pascal in both roles.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
he is...
He's good at it, but
He's
like
good at
there's
the tired dad thing.
There's
And then
others.
Kratos and
Yeah.
Atreus in God of War 3. Like,
Yeah.
the tired dad is a hot commodity here. But I feel like Logan is sort of like...
Proto-hot.
Proto-tired...
Tired, gruff, reluctant dad.
Tired.
Yeah,
dilf.
dilf.
That's
yeah.
what he is.
Yeah.
He is tired dilf.
Good.
So they break into the facility. They're trying to figure out how they're going to break into different teams to take care of this shit. And Wolverine does what Jean hates, he bolts. He goes to find his own answers because he does remember like tiny little snippets of what happened to him, and he knows the answers are down here. So he goes off to like look for those answers instead of working as a team to fix the problem. Rogue, Iceman, and Pyro are all back at the jet because they're kids. They were like, dude, y'all stay here at the jet.
You're literally children.
Yeah, you're minors. Do not.
And of course they do.
Later. Like, so Storm and Kurt go to find the kids because there are the few kids that the commandos got, they've brought here, and they've literally put in a cage. To be experimented on.
Yeah.
And basically Stryker is like, when I build a machine, I want to know if it works. So he's gonna just watch these kids die, presumably, while he gets Professor X to murder everybody, which we need to explain that.
Yeah, the method by which he is going to accomplish this is that it turns out Stryker has a mutant child of his own.
Yeah, and...
who is a very powerful psychic.
Yeah, a very powerful psychic. Strong enough that he kind of actually scared Professor X.
Do we want to be careful about pronouns with this character?
Yeah, so, okay, yeah, this is one of those interesting things where I'm not sure if it was written this way, but I'm pretty sure that Jason, this character, the way that I see it now from, like, 2023 perspective is it does seem an awful lot like she is a trans woman.
They are trans in some capacity. Because when Jason projects into Professor X's mind... When I first watched this movie, I assumed it was sort of like generic androgynous Victorian child because, you know, they dressed... It's sort of like a genderless night dress kind of thing.
Yeah.
But the closed captions describe it as a little girl's voice.
Yeah.
And Jason appears as
a little girl.
Young girl in their projections to other people.
Yeah. Always, and with all different people.
There's definitely a genderqueer read on that.
Yeah. I think the original intention might have been that, like, that is the most
innocent image that could have been conjured.
Yeah, yeah.
And that would help to manipulate the professor. And
it worked.
That is also a valid read.
But it also kind of feels like a queer read. So Jason is a very powerful mutant who possibly scared even Professor X. Probably because by the time Jason entered Professor X's care, I'm sure that Stryker and his wife probably had mishandled Jason and misunderstood, perhaps even inadvertently caused like a lot of like emotional damage.
But basically Jason kind of failed out of or was asked to leave the mutant school.
Yeah.
And then psychically manipulated their parents to the point where their mom killed herself.
Yeah. So
and then that turned Stryker sort of like down the evil path. Or further down the evil path.
Lobotomized his child.
And uses the cerebrospinal fluids to mutant control other people.
Yeah.
The mind control gel that he's been spritzing on the other mutants is basically the extracted brain juice of his child.
Oh.
Yeah. So it's pretty fucked up, y'all.
Yeah.
It's pretty fucked up.
This gets dark, actually.
But Jason is set on manipulating Professor X
into using Cerebro to kill all the mutants.
Yeah.
Kill them all.
All of them. Find them.
Find them.
So Professor X is going down to the cobbled together Cerebro.
Cerebro 2, that's what it's called.
And Storm and Kurt go to find the children. Jean goes with Magneto and Mystique because she does not fucking trust them, and she shouldn't. But while she is following them to go get Professor X, Cyclops, mind-controlled Cyclops, shows up and...
Mind you... It's a more interesting Cyclops.
It is.
Because he's evil.
I am kind of a sucker for the whole like temporarily evil.
Seconds.
But I actually
those 15 seconds were so much more memorable than anything else he's ever been in.
Yeah, I don't know. Like I do love temporary evil things.
It's one of your favorite.
It is one of my favorite tropes. So he and Jean fight, and in the course of their fighting, she deflects one of his eye beams, and it creates this crack in the foundation of the fucking dam. Because Alkali Lake is a lake because it's a dam.
It's a reservoir lake. And this has predictably negative effects.
Yeah.
Because of this tussle, Magneto and Mystique kind of was like, lovers quarrel, and they just
Yeah.
kind of skip.
Bye-bye!
This is one lover's quarrel, which I'm happy not to be a part of, or whatever. Again, more sassy.
More queen shit.
But Cyclops is snapped out of his evilness by being thrown across the room by Jean.
Instantaneously more boring.
And so he is helping Jean, and they're trying to meet up and with Storm and Kurt, who are able to get the children out of the room. But Wolverine is exploring the innards of Alkali Lake, and he finds the room that basically the adamantium was grafted onto his skeleton in.
So he's had, like, throughout this entire film, he's had slight kind of flashbacks whenever he goes and sleeps or whatever. He has nightmares of this room, of just, like, seeing Stryker's face above him.
In the tank.
The tank.
And the pain.
Like,
you know.
and everything about it. And, like, you get to see him explore this room for, like, the first time that he can remember. And you see scratch marks across the pillars.
Yeah.
You see, like...
Yeah, there's really great environmental storytelling.
Yes.
There's also, in the background, some x-rays, but if you look closely, they're
It's
not
not him.
Wolverines. But Stryker, I guess, and his bodyguard sort of happen upon him exploring. And Stryker is one of the few people who figured out how to, like, manipulate adamantium in its usable form, but he's like, but you gotta keep it hot. So basically they had to literally graft
Molten
metal onto Wolverine's skeleton to make him. But he's like, I used to think you were one of a kind, Wolverine, but I was wrong. And he starts to kind of like dip, because also he's figured out that the dam is like failing, so he's gonna get out of there. But he leaves his bodyguard behind, and Wolverine starts to run after Stryker, and she intervenes, and they start fighting, and it turns out that, so he like pops out his like claws, 3 on each hand, and she extends her fingers, and all of her nails extend these like long long adamantium claws.
Lady Deathstrike has entered the building.
Yeah.
A new challenger approaches.
And she also has super rapid healing. And so they're fighting each other. And
it's a very
for the first,
even match.
Yeah, for the first time, Wolverine is kind of...
He's kind of on the ropes.
On the ropes, because he's never had to fight somebody like him before. And...
Like, she's a lot more dexterous, and she's,
Yeah.
like, doing
She's faster.
cartwheels. And,
Yeah.
like,
Yeah,
doing
and-
all sorts of crazy
And
stunts.
he's never had to actually do anything fancier than just, like, punch. Stab.
And to be honest, for this movie, aside from Nightcrawler's whole opening, this is the
Oh,
scene
it's so good.
that stuck with me long after I had seen the movie.
The fight choreography in this movie is just so good.
Well, and Lady Deathstrike is just incredible.
Yeah,
I love
yeah.
her.
Like, she's dressed up kind of in that whole Matrix kind
Like-
of get-up.
A dominatrix businesswoman?
Yeah.
Which,
It works.
it checks a lot
Yeah,
of
like
boxes
power.
here.
Yeah, a power suit sort of thing.
Yeah.
I will say the camera work is a little bit...
It's a little dodgy. The fight choreography's great. The camera could have pulled out just a little bit further so we could see it.
Yeah.
But she almost has him. Like, she flips him onto this sort of grate that's hovering above the
Starts
adamantium.
bleeding him out. Yeah.
Yeah, the adamantium like pool thing. And she starts just stabbing him over and over again, probably to eventually bleed him out. It'll take a while, but he cuts the chains holding it, and they fall, and she falls into the adamantium, like the water beside
It's
the
a
like
cooling
molten.
pool.
Yeah. When she pops up, like literally, monster movie style, and like starts like stabbing him again because she won't fucking die, because he won't fucking die. He grabs the nozzle and shoves it into her and dispenses the like molten adamantium inside her. And it's actually really sad, because like she has also been mind controlled this entire time.
Yeah.
Which I would also like to make the point that this is just like, this is one of those things, isn't it? It's like Stryker wants to get rid of all mutants, but he is not above
Using them when they're
the
useful.
ones that are useful to him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway, but yeah, you see for a moment, like, that influence is, like, pushed out of her system.
You see it in her eyes. Her eyes start, they were very, very cloudy, and then
or they were, like, silver or something, because, I don't know.
They were very silvery, and then, like, eventually they just turned back to their natural brown color.
And she looks at him, and he looks at her, and he sees the humanity in her, and it is painful to him.
Yeah.
Because he realizes, like, she didn't
want to do this.
Yeah, he has sympathy for his enemy.
She perishes, and then she unceremoniously sinks to the bottom of
into the tub.
Plunk.
And plunk.
There's a metallic clonk, which it has unintentional comedic value in an otherwise very serious scene.
Yeah. So I think, like, the first time you see it, you're like, oh shit. But then, like, if you've seen it, like, a few times, it's kind of funny. Well, everything's going to hell elsewhere.
Yeah, the dam is falling apart. Everybody's running loose.
They're trying to get to Professor X.
But this is also the moment where Professor X decides to go ahead and mentally nuke all the mutants. Professor X is deploying his mental powers to kill all the mutants.
Yeah.
And their heads start, like, they all get super migraines.
Yeah. As Wolverine is tracking Stryker down again, and everybody is sort of, like, in motion, Magneto and Mystique have just reached Cerebro 2. And he has this helmet that, like, protects him from Charles's brainwaves. And so he breaks in with his metal powers to Cerebro. And
he looks down at Jason, and Jason's just like,
"The fuck are you doing here?"
Yeah, he interrupts this process.
And Magneto, the Queen, just simply taps his helmet and just walks on.
And he interrupts the process, so their heads stop hurting. Professor X temporarily stops focusing on everybody, on all the mutants, and that allows Mystique to turn into Stryker and whisper into Jason's ear, and instead asks Jason to find
Professor
all
X
the
kill the
humans. So, and then they sort of flick their hair and, job done, and they leave.
And Magneto breaks the door to Cerebro on the way out, so nobody else can get in.
Yeah. So I think there's a scene in here where Wolverine tracks down Stryker, and he's, like, kind of torturing him for information. Yeah, he's basically like, you took my life away from me, and Stryker's just like, I took your life away from you. As I recall, you volunteered. And he's like, basically you were an animal back then, and you're an animal now. You don't want to know the kind of person that you were, the things that we did, and implies that Wolverine was just kind of a piece of shit.
And
which maybe he was, maybe he wasn't. We don't.
Yeah.
Like we're not sure, but Wolverine is clearly disturbed by this. But then he hears the alarm going off. That's basically like, the dam is compromised, and he's like, what is that? And Stryker tells him, well, the dam's about to explode, and he's like, he switches so fast. He's like, come with me, Wolverine, I'll tell you everything you want to know. He's like, first he's like, you're a piece of shit animal, Wolverine,
but we can work together.
Yeah, you like, and then he's like, ditch the freaks and hang with me. And this does not predictably go over well. So Wolverine races back to go help his new friends, and they have trouble getting into Cerebro, but they also have a teleporter, and even though Kurt really shouldn't teleport places that he hasn't seen inside of before.
Well, he and Storm get to have another sort of reprise moment where she's just like, have a little faith, and I'll be with you.
Yeah.
And he manages to get him and Storm, and he manages to do it, and then she's kind of freezes Jason out of being able to do his.
Jason can't concentrate anymore because she makes it so cold in there. And it's really sad because the last thing that Jason's mental projection into everyone's mind as a little girl says is, oh, he's gonna be so mad at me. She really just wants to make her, she's in this mental state where she really wants to make her father proud. And she never could because it was never gonna be good enough.
Oof.
Yeah. Which also, interestingly, if they had killed all the mutants except Professor X and Jason, do you think Stryker would have kept Jason and used their, like...
Well, obviously. That's a super weapon that you can kill anybody you want with.
Well, and control anybody's mind and stuff. So
yeah. Stryker becomes God King of the United Planet.
Yeah. So the dam is failing. So Cerebro starts to break down, and there's like huge chunks of cement falling in, and Kurt has to teleport first Storm out, then Professor X. Doesn't
They
keep
just leave Jason because
they leave Jason there.
Willing participant of genocide? Yes. Reduced to the mind of a child? Also, yes. So it's like, the ethics are...
I mean, you could argue that Jason wasn't a willing participant in genocide.
Well, yeah, that's the thing, like...
However, it's very clear that Jason's powers were difficult to control, but I don't really think that's not a good excuse.
Because it's true Gene, too.
Yeah, like, it's
a whole tangle that doesn't get addressed because they just leave them behind.
Yeah. So they leave Jason. Everybody's rushing out to the jet, but the jet isn't there. But it turns out that Rogue, when she heard the like sirens, had took it upon herself to try to fly the jet and keep it off the ground just in case the dam broke.
But she's bad at it.
But she does manage to land it, and everybody gets on board. Wolverine is, like, carrying one of the children onto the jet when he sees Stryker, which Mystique and Magneto have paid Stryker a visit to and fucked him up. Also, they've absconded with Pyro, because Pyro was like, I want to join the Brotherhood, y'all.
Yeah, there was an earlier scene whenever they were all on the jet, and Magneto's just like, what's your name?
John. He's like, what's your real name?
Oh.
Pyro.
It's like, that's such an interesting scene to me.
It is.
So
that's a recurring thing that Magneto does. Like, what is your true self?
Mm-hmm.
Like,
embrace your mutant identity. Yeah. So they've left. Magneto and Mystique and John have taken the helicopter that Stryker was gonna, like, peace out in, and left Stryker behind. And Stryker says another few fucking, like, nasty parting words to Wolverine and offers him one more chance to turn away from these freaks and join the cool kids or something.
Basically.
And Wolverine this is where he makes his choice, who he wants to be, because now he's heard at least a little bit about who he might have been before, and he realizes, you know what, I'm not fucking interested in who I was before. I'm interested in who I'm going to be. Mm-hmm. And he makes a decision, and instead of running and fucking off, he's like, I'm going to stay. I'm going to stay.
He rips off his own, like, identification
tags.
His,
like, Wolverine identification tags, which
and
were, like,
throws them back at
really
Stryker.
important to him, and he's just like, I don't care about that anymore. Well, I don't care.
Well, it was important to him because it was his only
It was his only identity.
Yeah.
His only link.
His only link to his actual, like...
To his past. But he doesn't need it anymore because he wants to become someone new. Mm-hmm. So he gets on the jet, and everybody's getting on the jet, but then... some reason the jet isn't working, and everybody's freaking out, and Jean slips out of the jet and decides to really test her power to save everybody. And they only realize that she's gone when she's, like, out there, and she, like, sends a message through Professor X, and she's like, don't come after me, like, I want this. Like, I want to do this. And goodbye.
And Scott has a moment.
And Scott is freaking out. I would be too. Yeah, so is Wolverine. They're both like, what the fuck? No, Jane!
Yeah, it's like...
We didn't even give you a proper code name, no!
Yeah.
Well, there's that, but also, like, this is, like, one of the few moments where Wolverine and Scott don't fucking hate each other.
Yeah, they are perfectly aligned
about what's happening.
Yeah. And anyway, the dam breaks and all this water is barreling towards them. And Jean is, like, manipulating the jet, and she's trying to push it off the ground, but she's not quite there yet. And this, like, wall of water comes towards them, and she turns and, like, literally fucking parts the water like Moses. And it races past them. And using, like, all her power, she manages to push the jet up into the air and get it to take off. And then... her
disappears beneath the waves.
Yeah, her work being done, she lets the water overtake her.
And Scott and Logan are crying.
Which I think is really sad because Logan, he finally decided to stay.
And then
Promptly is.
I mean, I think he does it.
Man-pained.
He does it for more reasons than just
well,
that.
it's not just for Jean.
But Jean.
But it was also for Jean.
But I think Jean identified something that he needed to work on, and he was like, "Damn, I need to work on that, not just for her, but also like for me." And then she's like, "Dad," and he and Cyclops are like crying on each other, and then they, fresh on the heels of this, they go like, because the president is about to give like an address to the nation to be like to address the mutant problem. They go and like actually threaten the president, kind of like rightfully, and in a nice way, but it is a fucking threat. And they're basically like, "You better watch your words, Mr. President. Like,
because
we
we'll
didn't
be watching."
Yeah, we didn't cause this problem. Here's a bunch of documents to show you that like Stryker was the one who engineered like the attack on your life and all that
the
stuff.
call was coming from inside the house.
Yeah, this is like a false flag or whatever operation. But also, we'll be fucking watching. And in the end, they're like, basically, they're trying to make sense of like why Jean would pretty much commit suicide, like for real. And Professor X talks about how she always shied away from her power. She was always kind of like scared of it, but here she finally embraced it, and she was always looking to others to make choices for her, but here she finally made a choice. And then Logan tells Cyclops that, yeah, she did make a choice, and the choice was you. And so she made like
to
these
kind of give some closure, I guess.
Yeah, I guess for what it's worth. And life goes on at the mansion, and then it's like, mutation. It is the key to our evolution. And like we have that whole like spiel again from Professor X as the camera sort of flies over the lake, and from the lake you see sort of this winged bird thing rising up underneath the waters of Alkali Lake, foreshadowing the rise of the Phoenix Force with Jean Grey. So yeah, there you have it. That's X2. Okay, so the great things about this movie, the action scenes, as we said, were all fucking baller.
Yes.
The set design and the effects held up really well. And I think it's because they used, like, this was sort of like
it was the hybrid era.
Yeah, it was the hybrid era that I'm hoping that we're re-entering. But this is on the, like, side of, like, they were still using mostly practical effects, but they'd also learned how to use digital effects and CGI. And they were using both. And lo and behold, that looks fucking great and it ages well.
Mm-hmm. Think, like, same effects that apply to Jurassic Park, where some of the effects are like, you have digital dinosaurs, but you also have those practical effects of like.
But I also cannot get over how in X-Men and X2, but particularly X2, and X2 might be one of those sequels where the sequel might actually be better than the original. The action, the tension, it just keeps rising. The stakes keep going. The relevant themes, like, there's so much about this movie that just holds up really well 20 years later.
Yeah.
For better or for worse.
Yeah.
I think the only, like, drawback that I had was during the climax, there was a lot of back and forth from inside the dam, outside the dam, inside the dam, inside Cerebro, inside the dam. Like, I feel like...
Yeah, there was a lot happening simultaneously.
Yeah, and so that kind of got really, really distracting for me. Because I'm like, I like being in one location all at once whenever it's a very pivotal climax. And
there were a lot of irons in the fire.
Yes.
Yeah.
Which it's impressive that they were able to juggle it and still be, like, mostly coherent.
Yes.
Yeah.
But it was still a lot.
From a narrative perspective, so X-Men really focuses on the parallels between, compare and contrasting Professor X and Magneto, but also the journey of Rogue and Wolverine and how they relate to other mutants and how they relate to themselves and all that jazz. In X2, there's a lot more going on. Wolverine's through line is arguably the strongest, which is why I chose to talk about X2 as like the Amnesia Boy thing and not X1. But there's also some interesting foils between him and Jean and the whole making choices thing. Because of all the characters, they're probably the two whose agency is the most powerful, but caught between two worlds. Jean with who she was before, which is very timid and insecure and indecisive. Indecisive person, and becoming this like powerful, empowered woman. Those are like the two things she's struggling between. And then there's of course Wolverine, who is all the things I said before. Who was I versus who do I want to be? And I think on this watch through as an adult, I caught more of those sort of that synergy between them. I'm trying to think if anybody else really had as much driving them in the plot.
Oh, I mean, there's sort of like a second tier mirroring of Kurt versus Storm.
Yeah.
And sort of their approaches to how do you deal with trauma and oppression and things like that.
And there's also sort of what's going on with Iceman, Pyro, and Rogue, and how they choose to, how they choose to
negotiate
as teenagers, kind of where they're choosing to fall in this whole mess. And also just like Rogue and Bobby trying to figure out how to have a relationship when like they can't touch, which I don't know, as sort of an ace spectrum person, as a teenager, I was like, I mean, is that so hard?
Well,
I was like, I mean, it would kind of suck not to like kiss and cuddle, but like, you know, it's just nice to like be together.
There's no additional challenges to that at all.
No, so I was like, okay. But despite there being, I mean, I know there wasn't significant through-line character work for a lot of the characters. Despite that, there still was a lot of characterization for a huge cast.
Yeah, it was a big ensemble cast.
Yeah, and everybody got some time. Everybody got some characterization. Everybody got their little bits and bobs. I mean, even frickin' Colossus, who was in there for like 10 seconds.
You got a pretty good feel for what he was about.
Who he is and what he's about, and that's fucking baller.
My analysis for this would be like, I want to focus a little bit more on current iterations of like comic book superheroes. Like say like how it kind of helped to pave the way for modernization for superhero.
Yeah, it really did.
Ideas and stuff like that. Take your My Hero Academia, for instance.
My Hero can draw lines directly to these movies.
Mm-hmm.
It's just
so
like
much in common.
another kind of X-Men, and I fucking love it.
Just exploring like, you know, common uses of your abilities and your powers and just how you go about
mutant school
daily life.
And how do you
like slice of life.
Yeah, how do you negotiate that in tandem with just being an awkward adolescent?
Yeah.
Well, and how do you use really powerful things responsibly? Like, how do you do, and how do you regulate your actions when your actions could disproportionately harm other people in many cases? So, and My Hero Academia really explores that. I would also say that, like, again, X-Men and X2 and Logan, which someday we're going to, like, talk about and watch, but oh my god, it's so good, but it's so tough. Talk about tired dad. Jesus.
The most tired dad.
The most, oh god. Anyway, god, that's so heart-wrenching. But anyway, I feel like the MCU, and also to a certain degree, DC's properties, but particularly the MCU, have gotten away from what people actually really respond to. Like, action is great, but I think what people really want is to feel a connection to the characters, and they...
Well, that's why WandaVision was so successful.
Yeah.
Because it was a character exploration piece.
That's why Moon Knight was so successful.
Speaking of character interactions, like, in this movie, there's a few handfuls of moments where it's just two characters talking to one another.
Yeah.
Just like...
figuring each other out.
My favorite moment is when Logan and Iceman are all just talking in the kitchen. Just, willy-nilly. It's just, there's nothing really...
There's no spectacle.
It's just... characters interacting and bouncing off of one another.
It does serve
the purpose in the film of being like these two people are awake and in the same room.
Yeah.
But it also, it lingers. It gives time for these characters to talk to each other and for you to kind of feel a shifting in the dynamic between them. And you got that in the first Iron Man. You got that in like Captain America and Captain America Winter Soldier and you know some of the early like Phase 1 Marvel movies, which is what drew people to them and made them interested in these characters and these stories. But I think they've gotten really far away from that.
It's not about what character A says to character B anymore. It's about what they can do to each other. It's
how they can forward like the it's become plot oriented.
Well, and it's all in service to the shared universe, and a lot of movies suffer from not having independent stories that actually hold up.
That make us care about the characters.
Yeah, or that are just not very well executed.
Yeah. Which again, I feel like is why Moon Knight, which I fucking love Moon Knight, and we will talk about that sometime. I fucking love it. But Moon Knight and Werewolf by Night and WandaVision were really successful because WandaVision was kind of related to the larger MCU, but they, for large periods of time,
back down.
Yeah, it was kind of literally in its own bubble. Moon Knight and Werewolf, it's almost completely disconnected from the rest of the MCU, and so they got to completely focus in on the characters and their dynamics, and I just want that back. And X-Men and X2 really did it well, really made you care about these characters and made space for them.
And we don't talk about X3.
What is X3, babe? I don't know what you're talking about, babe.
Oh, you mean that Vin Diesel movie, Triple X?
Oh, yeah, that's what I meant. Yeah.
There's only X-Men, X2, Logan, and then, like...
Days of Future Past.
Well, no, the first, like, X-Men prequel.
First Class.
I really like First Class. So Age of Apocalypse and Days of Future Past are very on, shifty ground for me.
Age of Apocalypse is kind of like... But I like Days of Future Past.
Yeah, Days of Future Past, I'm like of two minds about it because I loved the original comic and I liked this adaptation okay, but I just...
Stylistically, I liked the Wolverine. Like the weird one where he goes to Japan.
Oh, right.
Like, that was kind of interesting to me.
That one wasn't the worst of them.
No,
I fucking
hate... Origins.
I hate Origins.
No. Everyone hates Origins.
I hate Origins so much. It's hard to adapt things one-to-one from the comics to movies, and you shouldn't do that, right? But I feel like you could have done it with Origins, or at least you could have been a lot closer. Better. Yeah, and Origins is such a good Wolverine comic anyway.
Oh, the comic's good, okay. The movie's
the movie's trash. I don't like it at all. I try to pretend that I never went to see it.
Wolverine literally gets a cool guy walking away from explosions moment, like the first 10 minutes, and it's totally unearned.
Okay, so the first, 5 minutes when they show Logan going through, different parts of history, albeit next to Sabretooth, which... That was cool.
But
the sequence was cool. I liked the sequence.
And then the rest of the movie just completely shit the bed.
Well, I want to say that one of my favorite cameos, though, of Huge Yak Man.
Oh, you're going to talk about First Class, aren't you?
Yeah.
So First Class, Logan is not in this. He's only in this movie for 2
seconds.
Well, yeah, Professor X and Magneto are going around trying to recruit mutants to their, new project, and they find Logan in a bar.
As you do.
Yeah.
And they're like, hey, would you be interested in...
And he's like, fuck off.
And that was it?
That's it. That's how they used their one F-bomb in a PG-13 movie, and it was perfect.
Perfect execution.
Yeah. No notes.
Yeah. And then he shows up again in Days of Future Past. I don't know. I tend to prefer Hugh Jackman, not as Huge Yak Man. I like him in X1 and X2 because he's more slender muscle.
Not super roidy yet.
Yeah. Later things, he's...
He does. You don't get that kind of vascularization without at least using some steroids.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm just not into that. I'm not into that look for him. But I think like Hugh Jackman, apparently, I think in an interview at one point he said like he really likes being
looking
like
that way.
which I'm like, good for you. But I really liked the first and second movie sort of Wolverine look. So yeah. All right. Well, do we want to slide on over into dessert?
Do let's.
All right. Yeah, so Wolverine, one of the OG Amnesia Boys for me. Okay, I've thought about this a lot. I tend to like characters who have amnesia or have some kind of like
Identity
Dr. Jekyll,
issue.
Mr. Hyde
Yeah.
sort of business going on. And I've done a lot of thinking about why I like that. And there's many, many reasons. But I think one of perhaps like the cardinal reasons for me, one of the core ones, is that both Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde type narratives and amnesia characters, like they provide such an opportunity to ask questions about nature versus nurture, and is the self immutable or can you change? And how much are these things like hardwired in, and how much is malleable? And I definitely was attracted to like amnesia characters before. I think I've always kind of been fascinated with them to a certain degree, but it really, like, Wolverine was sort of the thing I imprinted on. Like, it's like, it all came together in him. And yep, that archetype of character, or, you know, something kind of like it, has permeated most of my significant works from that day forward. It doesn't show up so much in my other podcast, The Harrowing of Minerva Damson. That's just not what that story is about. But there are other things that I have written that definitely have amnesia boys or people with identity crises in them. So definitely
D&D OCs.
Yeah, my D&D OCs, definitely, there's like a ton of amnesia boys. Oh, and you know, amnesia also, just by it being a thing, creates a duality, right? The person before and the person after. And now duality is like my shit, and that definitely shows up in the novel that I wrote before I made The Harrowing of Minerva Damson that's like related. So there's like definitely a lot of exploration of that if you're into it.
See, your D&D OCs, you use amnesia to, you know, write character. I use amnesia because I don't know most of the rule sets and laws. We are not the same.
That's another thing that's great about amnesia, though. It's a great entry point for like a viewer or a reader or somebody on the outside of a piece of art to learn with the character about the world.
Yeah. It's an interesting trope, and it's it can be used well, and it can be used really, really not well.
Yeah, just like all tropes.
If they are tools.
Yeah,
They're not inherently good or bad.
So I have like I would say there's like three male character archetypes that I like super gravitate to. One is the sort of Wolverine, angsty amnesia boy guy.
Gruff, tired dad.
Yeah, gruff guy. Heart of gold, though. But also just a little dangerous, maybe a little evil sometimes. And then there's the Superman / Captain America guy, who is just generally a good, upstanding guy who is very thoughtful and kind and thinks his way through problems, but is also very strong and is idealistic to the extreme and just has like a good instinct for what's right and sticks to that. And then there's the Spock Data third archetype of like super autistically coded. Mm-hmm. There's a reason why I gravitated towards that, as it turns out. But I'm like, I fucking love you. And I want to kiss you. I want to kiss you in your like big nerd brain. And I love you. And let's learn about emotions together. let's like connect with our humanity, but also like embrace our like weirdness.
How does that make you feel knowing about that third option, Jamie?
Oh, we already knew about that. I was about to say, the listeners can't hear you staring at me, Mitch.
Yeah. Yeah, no, X-Men and X2 and like Wolverine as a character, oh my god, the footprint on my work after that is so huge. Like, these are core memory, like anchor point, keystone character right here. So, and I could expound upon it a lot longer, and maybe I will at some point, but I think we're all tired and this is already kind of going long. So, Mitch,
Well, my only takeaway was I've actually used Pyro kind of as a... I just role-played as him as an RP at some point in my younger child.
was it like an online RP?
Yeah.
Forum-based?
It wasn't forum-based. It was actually, I think it was either on AIM or like Yahoo.
Oh my god. Okay.
Man, those days. That and Gaia Online. Does
Yeah.
anyone remember that?
I just remember the avatar builder because I was obsessed with it. But like, you know, it was I call it my Zuko phase. You know, I was angsty and
Moody
I was just, like,
Fire Boys.
Moody Fire Boy. and
Moody
like,
Fire Boys. I do like that.
No, I can't manipulate the fire.
Oh, you mean like Nicolas Cage Ghost Rider?
No.
Oh my god, that would be a great half-baked, I think.
would.
Like,
Yeah.
Which I actually genuinely love that movie. I
okay,
recognize
I
that
will
it's
have
dog
to,
like,
shit,
I will have
but-
to add to
yeah.
that.
I like aspects of that movie, but
Oh, I acknowledge it's bad.
yeah.
But I have a great
so
time.
bad,
It's
but
horrible.
it's so good.
I feel bad.
And that feels
Good.
oh god.
But yeah, no, that was my main takeaway was I've used it in silly things because I was an angsty teen at some point. And yeah, no.
I mean, but that is though.
That's a foundational creative work, whether you like it or not.
Yeah, I mean,
Unfortunately, yeah.
Having been an awkward teen myself, sometimes using the template laid down by a character
you know,
like
I've
is a
been
great
an awkward
guide.
teen
Yeah.
myself.
Yeah.
Like,
I'm not trying to exclude you from
no,
this.
no.
Yeah.
I know. I'm saying like the Green Goblin,
Yeah.
like Willem Dafoe meme.
Yeah.
Like,
Oh, God.
you know, I'm something of an awkward teen
Oh,
myself.
yeah. But, like, using a character you like as a template for how to interact with people,
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
great. It's a nice
It's a-
scaffold.
He was
Also-
honestly one of the first.
It's a neurodivergent, like, tried and true tactic. Embrace it, Mitch.
You know it to be true. Look into your heart.
But like, but that's the thing. Like, you know, we're all talking about how ashamed we are and how cringy it was the art that we made as teenagers.
Oh,
but
I'm not ashamed. I just recognize it as a flop era.
What's hilarious is I feel ashamed now too.
what I mean to say is, generally, creative people, or honestly, just like, you know, pretty much everybody is like sort of like, ugh, I did that as a teenager, so cringe. But I'm like, but literally, that is the shit that becomes the fertilizer
Yeah.
for like great work. You know, you have to go through that. You have to be a little cringy. But honestly, I also kind of like refuse to really,
Well,
truly
cringe
be
culture's
ashamed
dead.
of that. Cringe
Yeah.
culture is dead, but also like you loved something so much that you tried to emulate it, and maybe you did it in like the only way you knew how, which was a hyper dramatic teen way, but you had fun.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
fed you.
Well-
it kept you creatively alive.
The first time you ski down a slope, you're going to eat shit. The first time you draw a face, the eyes aren't going to be even.
Yeah.
Like, the first time you do anything isn't going to be good.
Yeah.
The point is, are you having a good time?
Yeah.
Slightly sucking at something is the stepping stones to becoming kind of decent at something.
And there are so many ideas that I had that were so like melodramatic and stupid. Like as an adult looking back, I'm like, man, those story ideas were so crazy. But I've still used parts of them and altered them over time to create some really badass shit, you know? Like
Yeah.
those super melodramatic, stupid ideas actually had grains of brilliance in them.
Well, honestly, there are some Word files from my teens that I've deleted because I was just like, this never needs to see the light of day.
I like to look at them sometimes just to be like, damn, I have improved.
Oh, sure. But, like, where I was going with that was... But I acknowledge it was a necessary stepping stone, and I also acknowledge that my interests really haven't changed that much from when I was a teen. They've just refined.
Yeah.
I can express them better now.
It's really kind of crazy how...
There's a lot of continuity to the things that resonate with you.
Yeah, and you tend to find them pretty dang early. Like, you can find them later too. Like, as an adult, I have picked up a few more things that fascinate me, but the bulk of them are definitely deep in my childhood. So yeah, I mean, you kind of have to go through that whole self-insert I'm pyro, aim chat RP phase. And I had to go through the writing a essentially rip-off of X-Men with a Logan rip-off teenage character, and then my, like, self-insert OC, and then them, like, low-key being in love. Actually, not even low-key. They're just like, it's gonna happen. You know it's gonna happen. To get where I am now. And that's pretty neat.
Yeah. Do you have any more to add to your dessert?
Nope, that's it. Oh! Hamometer.
Oh, shit.
Oh, yeah, okay.
It's kind of boring. It's only 5.
Middle of the road?
Middle of the road.
I mean, but that's what made it successful, is that it was middle of the road.
Because all previous superhero movies had been in, like...
in the stratosphere.
A+.
Yeah. Oh my god.
Well, okay.
Tim Burton forever.
Tim Burton. Oh.
Batman forever.
Tim Burton Batman is like...
Got the nipples on the...
No,
Well, no, Nipple Suit Batman was a different director.
Yeah.
Okay.
Joel Schumacher, I
Yes.
think.
Are you...
Yes, because Joel Schumacher was then and is now an openly gay director, and he chose his moment to deploy the nipple suits.
Yeah. Okay. I feel like all the ham points really come from just like Magneto and Mystique.
Yes.
Oh, the Mean Girls shit.
Yeah.
Oh my god, it's incredible.
You are not wrong.
So
Yeah.
that segues perfectly into my dessert round. My main takeaway from this movie, it did not influence me a lot as a creative growing up, but on a rewatch, I love a charismatic villain.
Yeah.
And you get a 2-pack in this one, because Magneto and Mystique are both incredible. They get great catty dialogue. Their motivations actually make sense and are largely sympathetic.
Yeah.
And they briefly team up with the heroes,
I
which
fucking love that.
leads the moral arguments in a lot more question than they otherwise would be.
Yeah.
Compelling villains. That's my takeaway. They're great. Watch this. Ian McKellen is queening it up the entire time, and
Having a great time doing it.
he and Mystique just get to play off of each other, and it's perfect.
Yeah. And, you know, Ian McKellen and Patrick Stewart, they always have fun.
Well,
in
they're
anything that they're in
best
together.
bros IRL. It's the best thing ever.
I honestly, like, there are times when I hope that our relationship, Jamie, just
matures into that.
Yes.
Yeah.
I would be Patrick Stewart because I'm probably going to go bald and my knees are shit.
Well, and Jamie's just way cattier.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm the sassier of the two, so I
Yeah.
have to be Ian McKellen.
So
Yeah.
you're also the wizard.
Does that make
Yeah,
me?
that checks
Does that
out.
make me Mystique in this
Oh, I hope
scenario?
so.
Yeah, because she's man. God, she's so like as an adult, I appreciate her even more. I'm just
yeah.
like, God damn,
Well,
this lady.
She isn't the same actress, but she reminds me a lot of the actress that played Seven of Nine.
Yeah.
In terms of, like, kind of performance, the way she carries herself, the way she's stacked.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, also talk about another like awakening of some kind.
Dangerous Blondes, right?
Yes, but also specifically 7 of 9.
Ah.
So I remember I didn't get to watch a lot of Voyager, but I remember seeing her and just being like mesmerized. And as it turns out, also, I fucking love robot or cyborg or whatever characters. So she was kind of an female autistically coded character
Which is a rare
who
thing
was
in media.
fucking stunning too.
Yeah.
And so I was like, oh my God, I don't know what I'm feeling right now, but it's
to be
something.
or to do.
It's something. I don't know if I want to be her or love her or like what's but damn, 7 to 9. But yeah, I guess I can kind of see that. Maybe. Yeah. Mystique.
Yeah, it's not 1-to-1, but I can draw a line between the two.
Yeah. I just think that the writers really knew what they were doing. They did great with foils in the first 2 X-Men movie, Amnesia.
Oh yeah.
amazing lens through which to examine characters and nature versus nurture. It's just got, and it's superheroes, which I fucking love. So, you know, it's got
How
it
can you
all.
go wrong?
Yeah, you really can't go wrong. X-Men X2 have aged very well, and I think it's worth watching and worth thinking about.
Yeah.
So, on so many levels. And I guess this is the thing that launched Hugh Jackman into, like, superstardom, wasn't it?
Yes.
Yeah, he was in other stuff, but I think this was his like big
breakout. And I think that Dougray Scott, if I'm not mistaken, which I might be, but I seem to recall reading at one point that like Dougray Scott, the guy who plays the prince in Ever After, was originally tapped for this Wolverine role, but then he had like a conflict.
Oh, that would not have worked
With like,
though.
I think it might have been, he was doing like Mission Impossible 2 or something. I don't even remember what it was, but I think he was doing something else. And so they went with Hugh Jackman.
And thank God they did.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, maybe Dougray Scott could have done it, but
He's
like,
too clean.
but I love Hugh Jackman.
Wolverine
He was just so
needs to be
good.
scruggly.
He's kind of like, you know, Hugh Jackman
Am I
is
wrong?
No.
it's kind of like, how do you get another person to play Wolverine? He's like made such an impression
on the role.
It's kind of like how Robert Downey Jr., it's like, how do you...
He's the iconic Iron Man.
Yeah, and I could see somebody else, for instance, like, I love Chris Hemsworth, right? I love Chris Hemsworth, but I could see somebody else eventually playing Thor. I could see, like, we've already had multiple actors play Hulk.
Yeah.
I mean, just do what Spider-Man does and just introduce a Spider-Verse, and that way you have all
multiple
these-
versions.
Yeah, you have all these multiple versions, and they're all valid
Honestly,
Spider-Man.
I love the multiverse, like, and that we are embracing it, because it's kind of like finally being like, you know what, canon is a
Wibbly thing.
Yeah, is a wibbly thing, and actually, let's actually explore all the different ways a story can go, and it's very smart because it's almost tapping into like how fan fiction works.
Well, and honestly, it's kind of funny because it's almost like the movies learned nothing from what the comics had to go through. Because the way that comics arrived at the multiverse thing was exactly what happened in the movies. Like, the plots got so interlinked
Yeah.
and got to be such a problem to keep track of who was where.
That they had to reboot stuff.
and eventually just fragmented
Canon
it.
became like,
Yeah.
what is even canon?
Yeah. Canon
But it
who?
turns out that people actually really like to play with alternate events.
Yeah,
And-
because being basically shackled by every other writer that has come before you for the last 60 years
Is suffocating to
Yeah.
the art.
That's one reason why I enjoyed the What If series so much, is because it explores into that.
Yeah.
they
Yeah.
screw
questions.
around.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so, I mean, I think that, I don't know if it's just like by necessity because of what you were just talking about with the being shackled to canon eventually becomes a hindrance, or if it's like somebody's very smart and realizing that like fan fiction, like one of the reasons why it's so popular and successful is because it explores these alternate things and people are really, really interested in that. Either way, I don't care. I fucking love it. I love it. I'm into it. Give me all the different kinds of weird stories. Do it. I love it. So anyway, all right, well, let's go ahead and wrap it up then, I think. It's time to clear the dishes.
I've
a-
already been quietly getting the Tupperwares out in the background.
Yeah. Put away the leftovers. We will be talking more about the original X-Men and probably Logan sometime in the future. So, we'll save those for next time. Put the dishes in the sink. I'm not washing them tonight. No, none of us are washing them tonight, but we'll get back to them. Don't worry. You don't have to worry about a thing, listener. Thank you for joining us for this meal that we laid out for this media morsel episode. This
Enjoyed the
feast.
food.
Yeah.
I made this for you!
And if you can think of anyone else who might like our show, go ahead and invite them. Send them an invitation. We'd love to have them at the table. You can find us on our Instagram at media_morsels. And we should be posting some things there pretty soon, even though we've been silent for a while. Like we said, we were the Amnesia Boys this month.
Yes, we were.
So,
There's some things coming.
but there are some things
Something
coming.
is coming.
Yes, something is coming. So look out for that. And hopefully we'll see you next time. We'll save you a seat.